Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. This episode is going to be a very interesting one, because at a first glance, you might not even think that it has anything to do with politics. But if you know anything about anything, you know, probably does. I did make a video about Star Wars before, so it makes sense that I might be covering a little bit more about it here. But before we get into that, let's get right into the news. First, an update coming from the French election. France has named a conservative named Michel Barnier as the prime minister. He was the guy who was basically negotiating, he was a foreign minister and EU commissioner, and I think he was literally pitched as the guy who negotiated Brexit. He is also a member of Les Républicains, the main center-right party in France. Now, if you remember, this party didn't win the most recent French legislative election. The most recent party to win, like the party that won the most recent election, is the French coalition, the New Popular Front. But it's weird. Their prime minister candidate, they didn't even get heard. They were just told point blank that they wouldn't do the person, and they instead backed this person. And it turns out this person also has this new endorsements of, even to the point where Le Pen has even said that they support this new person to be prime minister, which does not bode well for people who seem to understand the concept that a lot of liberals really do seem to just hate the left more than they hate the right, to the point where they're literally like, yeah, Le Pen, like, literally, this is the equivalent of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump working together to prevent Bernie Sanders from being president. That's just the most, not even that, I would even say it's even less than that. It's the equivalent of them making it so that Obama can't be president. Or maybe it's not exactly, it's a little bit complicated to, like, explain this in an American sense, but otherwise, yeah, this is just very bad for a lot of things. The only thing that is interesting is basically what would happen next, because this guy has to go through a vote of confidence, and simply, if there's a vote of no confidence, then they have to pick a new prime minister, and that could be where the French left basically gets to squeeze in their guy in. Or Macron could actually call for snap elections again, but he can't do that until after 2024. I think actually he can't do it until after 2025. So he would literally have to, like, be forced to work with the left to actually do things. But since the left is already a sizable voting bloc, it's like, I guess they do have a lot of power anyways. But it just really seems stupid that literally they want a plurality. They should be the ones to get the prime minister. That's kind of the rules. Like, a lot of these parliamentary systems are really stupid like that. Like, during one of the Israeli elections that happened not long ago, they literally, like, even though all the parties that were not Netanyahu's coalition were the ones that won the majority of the seats, they went to Netanyahu first to ask him, hey, do you want to form a coalition with anybody? And they gave him the opportunity to run a coalition, and then when it failed, he immediately just said, nope, we're just going to call a snap election. I'm not even going to give the opposition a chance to even dictate how this coalition can pan out. You know, hot take, party that wins the most votes should win. You know, color me, like, shocked. Speaking of shocked, Venezuela has shocked me about something very interesting. Nicolas Maduro has announced that Edmundo Gonzalez might actually go to jail. Okay, so let's explain this story a little bit more. Basically, a Venezuelan court has ruled, or at the very least has issued a warrant to arrest the opposition's candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez. The warrant was issued at the request of authorities who accused Gonzalez, a former diplomat, of various crimes including conspiracy, falsifying documents, and usurpation of powers. The move is the latest escalation of repression against the opposition. In the month after the election, officials declared President Nicolas Maduro has won his third 6-year term in office. So I think the claim is that since Gonzalez and the opposition are making the claim that he won the election and not Nicolas Maduro, that is the claim that they're going to use against Gonzalez. Which I don't know 100% if that is, like, not, like, allowed. Like, to use an American example, it's like Donald Trump had every right to say that he was the legitimate winner, but it was when he did the fake electors, when he did the find a couple of thousand votes, when he did that is when there was issues. But as far as I can tell, Gonzalez, all he has said is he claims that he is the legitimate winner. Although granted, you know, given Maduro's, like, very obvious, like, more authoritarian shift in very recent years, especially in the wake of this election, I wouldn't be surprised if all of this was just, like, completely fake and that he's just doing this in a way to get rid of an opposition figure? Because Maduro has gotten rid of multiple opposition figures in the history of Venezuela. Like, I mean, you can make the claim of, like, Chavez being cool. Chavez is cool. I love Hugo Chavez. But Maduro is just clearly, like, way past the deep end at this point, man. He's literally went so far as to claim that if he didn't win, there would be bloodshed in his country. And it's like, yeah, that totally sounds like a sane guy. But shifting from a bad Latin American socialist to a good Latin American socialist, let's talk about the situation in Brazil. Brazil, as far as we all know, has had this very interesting debacle with Elon Musk and Twitter. So here's what has happened. So, if you don't remember, 2022, there was a big election in Brazil. And Lula da Silva, former president, won that election. And current president at the time, Jair Bolsonaro, made the claim that the election was rigged against him, and a lot of right-wing accounts made those claims as well, and made a lot of claims against the Lula government. Now, misinformation on social media has been a hot topic in a lot of countries, especially as of recently, with the rise of misinformation being way more prominent. Some nations have taken a very strict mode in regards to combating misinformation, others have been taking a more lax approach. Brazil has been taking a very noticeable drive to combat misinformation. And what was requested of Elon Musk was to simply ban 7 huge accounts that were spreading misinformation about the Brazilian elections. I should also mention this. One thing that is more interesting is the fact that in Latin America particularly, misinformation is like 10 times more prominent than it is in the West. I know a lot of people in the West, like America, UK, and all those other countries, like to think that it is them, but in Latin America, it is way more common. I follow a ton of Latin American politicians on social media, and literally half of their feeds are no joke, literally pictures of like WhatsApp screenshots that say something with the word falso stamped on top of it, because they have to debunk a narrative that appeared on WhatsApp, especially when a lot of media in Latin America is very heavily leaning to the right. So what ends up happening is that rather than listening to the Brazilian government and following their demands, Elon Musk said no, and then pulled the Brazilian representative of Twitter in the country. Now, here's the thing. If you actually know anything about Brazil, you know this. If a company wants to operate in Brazil, they need to have a legal representative in the country. So then the guy who was in charge of the Brazilian Supreme Court said, hey, Elon, bro, what you need to do is you gotta name a representative, or else we're gonna have to take the most drastic measure and ban your app from being on Twitter, from being on in Brazil. Elon Musk said no. So Brazil banned Twitter, even though Brazil is literally the 3rd largest country on Twitter, with literally millions and millions of users on Twitter, which is very hilarious because of the fact that, again, remember, this whole country started because Brazil wanted Elon Musk to ban 7 accounts. Now, the entirety of Brazil is no longer going to be able to use Twitter. Really great business decision, Elon. But reminder, this isn't about business. It is about Elon Musk trying to spread a far-right political agenda. That has always been what it is, and that is what it will continue to be. As many people pointed out, the far-right governments in Turkey and India both have made a very big request to Elon Musk to censor information about their political opponents, and not even misinformation. Remember, this is just them point-blank telling Elon Musk, censor our political opposition. Like, I think, if I remember correctly, the Turkey situation was that Turkey was going to be a huge rally to rally against their right-wing government, and then Twitter conveniently shut down on that day, and it was discovered that Elon Musk and the guy who was in charge of Turkey were in cahoots to literally make that happen. But remember, India is run by a far-right guy, Turkey is run by a far-right guy, and Brazil is currently run by a socialist. Interesting. Again, this isn't about anything regarding misinformation. This isn't anything regarding free speech. This is purely about partisan politics. Speaking of partisan politics, someone from the UK is finally going to jump back into partisan politics. Jeremy Corbyn, who has finally made the announcement of the political alliance with the 4 other pro-Gazan MPs. Forgive me for mispronouncing their names. ᵏⁱⁿᵈᵃ, Aidan Hussein, Ayub Khan, Iqbal Muhammad, yeah, those guys, they are going to be forming a new political organization known as the Independent Alliance. You might have noticed I didn't necessarily say political party. I did say when I started this story, but I need to be a little bit crystal clear about this. This is not technically a political party. Under its explicit title, it is a technical group. Basically meaning that it is it's a little hard to explain. It's not formally a political party, but in the parliament, it governs as if it is a political party. I could be wrong, but this is very similar to the group Change UK, formerly the Independent Group, then turned to the Independent Group for Change, and then of course became Change UK. It starts out as we're not technically a political party, but we're just going to split off and form this new group. But then he does it, CORBYN makes it a point that it is not a political party. But here's how it works in the UK. In the UK, there are points where you can actually directly ask questions to the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. And basically, each party gets the chance to give these questions. But independent MPs don't get to have this opinion, don't get to do questions. And since all 5 of these people are elected as independent MPs, that would mean they wouldn't get the chance. They did try very briefly in the first couple of times, but it didn't really work out that well. So what they decided to do is they're forming this group to effectively be able to now get to ask questions during question time. But I'm going to make the point, I think this group is going to 100% be a political party by the time the next UK election rolls around. And I know this because Jeremy Corbyn has openly stated that he is open to expanding this group to include the 7 MPs that were kicked out of the Labour Party due to the fact that they supported the new, due to the fact that they supported an SNP bill. John McDonnell, Richard Durgan, Ian Brine, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Imran Hussain, Aspan Bergam, and Zara Sultana. And honestly, they should go for it. I honestly think that the Independent Alliance should work together, and with that name, they can easily use this, because I've had this crackpot theory in my head for a while, that Jeremy Corbyn will be the guy that will help lead the United Kingdom to fall. Hear me out. The Sinn Féin, Plaid Cymru, Scottish National Party, they're all left-wing. And all these MPs have alignments with these left-wing groups. Jeremy Corbyn, talk to those guys and be like, hey guys, help support me to become the new Prime Minister. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to vote to get you guys out of the UK. Based, if true. Won't be true, but based if it does become true. Speaking of things that are true, turns out we've learned some things about some of our favorite conservative commentators. Because it turns out that according to a DOJ report, it turns out that Russian oligarchs Koisetan Kalashnikov and Elena Asafov had been laundering money in a conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and they have been funding many, so basically, they used to work for RT, Russia Today, the Russian-made media outlet that had to be shut down in America due to the fact that of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And there was a conservative, media group called Tenet Media, and it turns out that these guys have literally been funneling money to Tenet Media, and that is why a lot of these right-wing channels conveniently randomly just started talking about pro-Russian talking points, including but not limited to Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, and Dave Rubin. And none of this is a surprise by any stretch of the word, because Dave Rubin and Tim Pool literally used to be left-wing content creators, then they magically started shifting to the right, then, especially recently, they shifted heavy far-right. There's literally footage of Tim Pool, he's randomly starting to talk about the Russia-Ukraine war. It's this dude has no experience at all talking about Russia-Ukraine, so why the hell is he talking about it? Now, I know I'm not one to talk. I talk a lot about issues that I technically shouldn't know about, but you see, I don't need $5 million to give my opinions. I'm pretty sure those 4 got, more. Now, there are some people who have tried their best to make these 2 guys clearly didn't know, But now all of them are literally trying to do damage control to make them, oh no. They're basically doing everything to make themselves look as guilty as possible. Such as Tim Pool literally going so far as to use his Twitter account, and now he's trying to completely change his complete perspective on these issues. Now he has a Ukrainian flag in his bio and says like, after due diligence and research, I am now 100% supportive of Ukraine. It's like, really? But this is nothing new. A lot of conservative commentators literally completely change their mind just because they are like completely bought and paid for by other like oligarchs. Like, I mean, a lot of the prominent conservative commentators nowadays, again, used to be leftists. Like Dave Rubin, as I mentioned before. Dude literally used to be a member of the Young Turks, and now he is literally just a right-wing conservative. And as Anna Kasparian once said, the reason why he changed his views was purely because he wanted money. And every time he would network with other creators in his sphere, he would just ask them, what's your plans? Are you going to plan to make a TV show? Are you going to do this? And it's like, no, I'm kind of happy doing this online thing. And he's like, well, he just wanted to branch out and do like different things. Turns out, yeah, he wants to be a Russian agent. And apparently Tim Pool is literally like trying to change things up again because it's apparently he's literally saying like, oh, like he's trying to argue that his thing makes sense. But anyways, like one more thing that is very confusing and very like troubling for this is the fact that one of the people that I mentioned that was in this network is Benny Johnson. And Johnson has affiliations with 2 U.S. senators, as far as I know. He has affiliations with both Rand Paul and Mike Lee. Mike Lee literally just posted on Twitter today, like saying like, oh, one of the reasons why I joined Twitter with this based Mike Lee account was that I was because of this guy. It's like, wait, hold on, this guy who's literally just indicted as being a Russian spy, that guy is literally the reason why you did this? And Rand Paul, apparently one of his chiefs of staff, or like the guy who is his chief of staff, I think Benny Johnson was a member of his staff at one point, but then there was also another member of his chief of staff that literally just got arrested for being a Russian asset. It's like, what? It's just so weird that this is the world we live in. I literally just made a video talking about how a senator was used to be Russian, like to be assets of a foreign government, but at that time it was for the Nazis. Man, that's crazy. Speaking of crazy, the Internet Archive is about to get really crazy because there was a court case that has been debated a lot, and it has finally reached its peak. The Internet Archive has lost its appeal in a fight to lend out scanned ebooks without the approval of publishers. In a decision on Wednesday, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that permitting the Internet Archive's digital library would allow for wide-scale copying that deprives creators of compensation and diminishes the incentive to produce new works. The decision is another blow to the nonprofit in the Hachette v. Internet Archive case. In 2020, 4 major publishers, Hachette, Penguin Random House, Wiley, and HarperCollins, sued the Internet Archive over claims its digital libraries constitute willful digital piracy on an industrial scale. The Internet Archive has long offered a system called the Open Library, where users can check out digital scans of a physical book. The library is based on a principle called digital lending, where each loan corresponds to a physical purchased book held in the library, avoiding, in theory, a piracy claim. It's a fundamentally different system from programs like Overdrive, where publishers sell limited-time licenses to ebooks for their own terms. But if you remember, in this story, the story began in 2019, or in 2020, when COVID happened. So then a lot of people wouldn't be able to go to physical libraries. So many of them turned to the Internet Archive's online library as an example. But like here's how the rule works. If the Internet Archive owns 2 copies of one book, then they can loan out 2 digital copies of the book. Even though there's nothing stopping them from loaning as many digital copies as they want, they would only limit themselves to 2. But during the COVID pandemic, the Internet Archive said, maybe for this brief period of time, we will lift that restriction and people can download all these books. People can look at all these books on the Internet Archive for free. And this program became a massive success. So there were some rumblings that the Internet Archive would be interested in keeping this system permanent. And that is when these companies came in and said, nope. And now, a lot of them are literally even just pulling their books from the Internet Archive to not be allowed to be lent anymore. And allegedly, one of them is a copy of the book 1984. a book that we all know is a very well-known story about an authoritarian regime silencing the spread of information. That has got to be the fucking dumbest rule I have ever seen, because, I mean, I don't know if I can legally say this, but I'm going to give a hot take here. I think the Internet Archive should literally have just started doing this forever. I think the Internet Archive needs to be able to do this. As a literal victim of piracy, I can say that. I believe that it is in the best interest of information to be readily available to people, regardless of your economic status, regardless of its availability. We live in a world of the internet. The internet has access to literally every piece of information that we have created as human species. Why should that be behind any barrier? I mean this for every context. News, like books, media, everything. Everything should be readily available. And I've been 10 times more radicalized on this issue alone, because genuinely, I am at the point where it's like, literally, who cares? Again, as a person who is technically a victim of video piracy, yeah, I think that's fair. For information to be readily available for people to watch, review, or whatever, to play, or whatever. Everything, every movie, every book, every newscast, every, thing, everything. And we need to do everything in our power to support the Internet Archive as they are to survive. And while we're at it, let's talk about the last news story, which is a news story that is very, very interesting and is going to be a very sad story to a lot of people, especially if you're an early viewer of this channel. So, RFK Jr., he won an appeal to get off the ballot in a couple of states. Because, if you remember, RFK Jr., he dropped out and he was like, I will pull my name from the swing states. Even though he passed the ballot deadline in a couple of states, including, but not limited to, North Carolina. And North Carolina said, sorry, RFK Jr., you can't be allowed to, you are allowed to be on the ballot. That is the thing. You missed the deadline, ergo, you're going to be on the ballot. The ballots were ready, the ballots were literally printed, and the ballots were literally slated to go out the day I'm recording this, the Friday. But then, the Republican Supreme Court of North Carolina made the decision, unilaterally, we're just going to, remove him from the ballot, which has now delayed the process of people getting their ballots. As far as I can tell, they have to literally re-request their ballots. Many lower-income voters and voters overseas, including members of the military, they literally will not have their ballots printed out in the time to be submitted for the election. Which many people are pointing out is election interference. This is just so blatantly... The RFK Jr. situation is one of the most blatantly obvious grifting presidential campaigns in history. It is one of the most blatant grifts that I've ever seen. The dude was a Republican plan since day one. For those who need a refresher, this was the plan. RFK Jr. was goaded to running in the Democratic presidential primaries by right-wing Republicans like Steve Bannon, Trump's advisor, and Roger Stone, who wanted RFK Jr. to be the running mate. They literally begged him to run for president. Then, when he ran, he started getting promoted by conservative commentators, right-wing commentators, Trump-aligned commentators. The people who were bankrolling his campaign were right-wing Republicans who were donating to him, supporting him, retweeting him, making sure that everybody knew RFK Jr. was running. Then RFK Jr. calls foul of the Democratic primaries, withdraws from his bid, announces an independent bid, effectively trying to facilitate a Dem exit. He's trying to get the Democratic voters to siphon off, run for his independent bid. They have Donald Trump run and be like, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., this guy's a fucking far-left liberal radical. But then in the same breath, be like, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is he's this nice, wonderful, amazing guy. And he's both goading his supporters and also claiming that, he's doing everything to make it look like, these two are not affiliated with each other, but doing everything enough to make it look like, they're very clearly affiliated with each other. But then it turns out, RFK Jr., this is the big problem. This doesn't work because nobody likes RFK Jr. on the Democratic side. Literally nobody. Literally the day he announced his presidential bid, literally every single one of his cousins and family members announced that they were backing Joe Biden and then later Kamala. They did not like him. They were like, we denounce his bid because the dude is a far-right anti-vax crank. The dude is literally responsible for 80 dead people in Samoa because he spread far-right anti-vaccination misinformation. And there's some people who are trying to make the claim, like nowadays, like, oh, well, who was in a GOP plan? It's like, dude, he was very obviously a GOP plan. He was goaded to run by Republicans. Republicans were the ones who were backing him. Republicans were the ones who were like making it known, like, oh, RFK Jr., RFK Jr., RFK Jr. Can you name me a single left of center voter who was openly courting like fucking like Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? None of them, because they didn't exist. None of their support was from the left, but they're trying to paint it as if he was. They thought he was going to be that candidate. They thought that was the case. That's why they donated the money to him, to make it so that because in their brain, everybody who is not a Republican is considered far left to them, when that is just obviously not true. And when he looked like he was a threat to Biden and the Democrats, it's like, oh, you see, like, we need to get Biden to drop out. We need to get Biden to drop out. We need to get Biden to drop out. And then Biden does drop out. And it's like, oh, wait, you weren't supposed to do that. We were supposed to just use that to, like, goad people into not trusting you and voting for Kennedy. And it's like, no, we took your advice. Biden's old, so we're not going to run him anymore. We're going to have Kamala run. And then everyone's like, oh, shit, new candidate. And then everyone flocked to her. And now she literally is basically poised to almost unilaterally win the presidential election. So they find out, oh, wait. Like, they learned a little too late. Oh, wait, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not hurting Dems. He's hurting us. So then they just announced, oh, yeah, magically, Kennedy, even though during the primary, he's like, I hate Donald Trump. I will never work with Donald Trump. Blah, blah, blah. Like, even though he does that, all of a sudden, he's like, Donald Trump is the only candidate who really cares about us. Like, for real, the dude is just fucking obviously a plant. And what's worse is RFK Jr. now has done something to the third-party movement that a lot of you people who are third-party like supporters and sycophants, you're going to want to sit down for this. Because guess what? All this spiel and all this drama, this is going to hurt you guys. RFK Jr. is not going to get hurt by this. You guys are. Because literally, let's look at what objectively happened. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. spent the entirety of the campaign saying, I am a serious candidate. He spent all this time being like, he's serious. He's motivated. He's going to build this momentum. He's going to ride the coattails. He's going to form a new third-party movement in the United States. He spends all this time, money, and energy to get on the ballot in almost as many states as he can, including but not limited to many of the popular swing states in the country. This isn't the first time he's been in a court challenge about his ballot access. He's been on this court ballot access drive for a while now to get on the ballot. He had to spend a lot of time and money to get on the ballot. And he did all of this, again, to hammer in the point that he was going to be a candidate for president in the next election. And now, magically, he goes, yeah, can you please take me off the ballot, please? Now, literally not a single third-party candidate can be trusted for this anymore. Because what if the same thing happens to another third-party candidate? They spend all this time, energy, and money to get on the ballot, and then they just go, nah, can you please take me off? That's literally what's going to happen again. Like, they're going to be afraid that that's going to happen again, and they're going to waste all this time, energy, and money to get them on the ballot, and they're going to, remember, due to this fact, ballots will not be delivered. They had the money, they printed ballots, they were ready to mail the ballots, and now that Kennedy has done this legal challenge, now a ton of ballots are just going to be thrown away. So now it's going to be infinitely harder for third-party candidates to get on the ballot, because then they have to be like, now that you put all this effort in, they have to make sure you put in so much effort that you literally just, it takes more effort to get off of it than it is on it. So yeah, he's, again, very obviously a GOP plant, whatever. Anyways, let's move on to the main topic of this video, and as I said before, this is going to be a very different episode from previous ones. In fact, it's going to be so different that it's not even going to be, I don't even think it will be labeled under the news and politics, like, thing. It might be labeled under, like, media or movies or whatever. And before anybody goes in, yes, this video is fully made and inspired by a very recent controversy, but is also inspired by a very weird trend that I have seen since the Disney buyout of Star Wars. And with that, let's just get into it. But first, I guess we'll have to go a little bit into a backstory for a lot of things. Backstory for why I'm talking about this. Backstory for why this is important to this channel. Why is this important at all? Well, let's start off with this fact. I have been a fan of Star Wars for literally as long as I can remember. I quite genuinely do not remember a piece of history in my lifetime where I was not a fan of Star Wars. Even when it wasn't my primary hyperfixation, it really does fes like, and does like really seem like it was and still my first fandom. it served as my primary inspiration for wanting to get into the creative field in the first place. Like, quite literally, it is, in the most objective sense, like, one of the biggest inspirations to me in my lifetime. Take that with what you will. Like, literally, when I was younger, I literally made up a Star Wars franchise in my mind. I don't think it was exactly Star Wars, but it was like basically very heavily Star Wars inspired. Very much like a Star Wars. I own a shit ton of like Star Wars merchandise. I own like a shit ton of Star Wars, like, I own a shit ton of Star Wars, like everything. I owned a lot of things. I owned literally quite a lot of things. I have the OG trilogy as video cassettes. I own like a lot of the Star Wars movies. I don't own all of them, but I own some of them. I own a decent number of them. Let me think. The only Star Wars film that I don't think I've ever owned was Rise of Skywalker, and of course, like, the spin-off movies. I own a shit ton of Star Wars toys from a lot of different eras of Star Wars. I mean, literally, I would have, like, sometimes when I'd have my grandmother would literally just be like, hey, I found these old Star Wars toys in, like, this box in my house. You want them? And it's like, yes, please. So I have, like, a couple of toys from literally the 80s when they first released Star Wars, combined with, like, toys from the Star Wars, the Clone Wars. I have a bunch of Star Wars Legos. Like, I don't have, like, a lot of the sets built anymore because I didn't take good care of them, but, like, I have a lot of the minifigures. I have random ideas of, like, Star Wars related things in my mind. Like, I've done a lot of things with Star Wars in my mind, and yeah, even though it doesn't even necessarily, I don't talk about it a lot because of a couple of things. One, this channel does not necessarily give me the platform to discuss Star Wars a lot. I mean, I've made a 3-part series that I compiled into one video about all the, like, political elements of all 3 of the trilogies. And once Andor concludes, I do plan to make an episode on Andor. Maybe I could do episodes where I go a bit more in depth on Star Wars: The Clone Wars or something along those lines. But that's a little bit of the out there story, like a little bit of an out there idea. But another reason why I don't talk about it a lot is kind of just because it's like, it kind of feels so grandfathered in. Like, the idea of me not liking Star Wars is just super alien. Insert funny sci-fi joke about it being alien. But, like, yeah, the idea of me not liking Star Wars is just kind of, like, so out there that it's just not possible. But another thing that this hyperfixation did for me was that it led me to do something interesting. Because, sometimes you'd put in, your hyperfixation in, like, a YouTube search bar, and you'd find Star Wars related videos. And I've watched a ton of Star Wars videos in my lifetime. Oh boy, you do not understand. When I was younger, I used to watch I used to watch a ton of like Lego Star Wars videos. Quite literally, there were a lot of Lego Star Wars, like Star Wars toy videos that I did, and it was amazing. I loved it. Those were like part of my like childhood growing up. 2007, 2008, boy, those were the days. There's like this one video of this kid, and he like has this really good Star Wars like Lego thing. It was like a Clone Wars battle related thing, and it was like completely stop motion, and it was like really fucking good. To the point where it's like, it has millions of views and ads enabled on them. It's so good that I'm literally just like, I hope that kid still has access to this YouTube account. Because if he has access to this YouTube account and he has that ad revenue, dude is fucking rich. Dude is rich. I am telling you. When I was, again, like, when I'm talking about, like, recounting stories of when I was, like, younger, there were literally, like, stories, or, like, not stories, like, when I was a kid, there was, like, another YouTube video I remember where it's, like, fucking, like, it was like, this dates, like, my lifetime a lot, but it's, like, Soulja Boy videos where Luke and Vader are the ones doing it. These are just random Star Wars memories from when I was a kid. But, as I got older, I kind of, like, developed more taste for different kinds of content, I'd watch, like, sometimes I'd watch Star Wars parodies, Sometimes they'd have, like, a Star Wars parody, which sometimes would, again, be used in, like, a Lego format. Sometimes I'd watch reviews of, like, some Star Wars products, some breakdowns, some lore ideas, some, like, and there were even some ideas and concepts that were very interesting. Watching like a nostalgia critic type video where like someone like reviews The Phantom Menace, that's one thing. But watching a video where someone goes, well, I think The Phantom Menace could be changed around a lot, so I'm actually going to rewrite The Phantom Menace and make it as if it's a completely different movie. That was very creative. I watched a ton of things. I mean, I'll even just say this. One of my favorite Star Wars channels to this day is Hello Greedo. And he's made like a wide variety of Star Wars content. Reviews, parodies, breakdowns about the Star Wars changes and all this stuff. Dude was very interesting. Another one is I guess I gotta say this. Mr. Plinkett, the favorite, but I didn't watch his videos until like way later than everyone else did. But I did end up seeing them, and it seemed like everywhere I went, it was a cavalcade of Star Wars content, and it was all happy-go-lucky. But then something changed. Especially with the Disney buyout, at least from my perspective, very least from the Disney buyout to the thing, to like the release of The Force Awakens and the inevitable other sequels, there was a huge shift in Star Wars content, a huge shift in the fandom. Now, there had been a little bit of issues about Star Wars fans having divisions, previously, as I mentioned before. Red Letter Media perpetuated with an entire generation's views of the prequel trilogy via the Mr. Plinkett videos, which were both intended to be satire but were perceived to be real, because it's one of the big things about a lot of early online review content. Even though it is very clearly parody-ish, it's kind of an exaggeration of your actual views of it. For example, this isn't it. I'm trying to remember. For example, if Mr. Plinkett says Star Wars The Phantom Menace is the biggest disappointment since my son, I don't think he actually means that. I think it's just an exaggeration of him being disappointed in the movie. And Hello Greedo was not necessarily immune to that kind of content as well. But this recent wave seemed very different. And while there was still a lot of element of toxicity from previous things, it went further than typical nerd outrage. Now there was an added so-called political element towards this drama. Now, originally, even though it's ironic, the prequels were very political. I made a video talking about how they're so political, and they are very clearly political. The whole franchise is political, but when they say political, what they actually mean is blacks and women. Literally, that is it. It's one of the dumbest things I've seen. It was an evolution of the Gamergate dramas. For those who don't remember, Gamergate was when a bunch of gamers got mad because some people made video games that weren't necessarily beat 'em up, shoot 'em up games, but were instead more philosophical based games, more intellectual games, ones that tackled issues like sexism and racism. And despite the fact that, again, you could literally just not play these games if you don't like them, but they felt this weird, big hatred, and to the point where they literally just we should make it so that these women get harassed for doing this to our gaming industry. Especially considering they were making criticisms towards the gaming industry. Even though when male gamers criticize the gaming industry, they're allowed to do that. But when females do it, that's a bit too far. Coinciding with other pieces of media deciding to tackle these issues as well, and also just very simply allowing people of color to be part of the nerd franchises that were typically seen as the scapegoats for white nerdy males. Now, I'm not a white nerdy male, so I very clearly didn't really see the issue. There were some criticisms that I got, kind of, and I did, hate SJWs when I was younger, but even to an extent, I just didn't understand certain things that there were criticisms of. This whole criticism that the sequel trilogy was political is just stupid, because it is literally the least political Star Wars trilogy. The only thing that is different is that the cast was majority minority. And due to this fact, we would get the rise of a new generation of Star Wars YouTubers, and old Star Wars YouTubers jumping on this trend, where, especially after The Last Jedi, where rather than having the videos be about Star Wars, the videos were now more focused on the media aspect of Star Wars, claiming that it had become woke, that they were panning to the SJWs, shitting on Kathleen Kennedy for literally every little thing that happens in Star Wars, etc., 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 alongside some fans who take it one step further, who decide to harass actors for literally doing their job. Actually, scratch that. It's worse, because they don't get harassed for the fact that they do their job or they're not good at their job. They literally get harassed for the fact that they are minorities. Like, I mean, quite literally, the first thing to happen after the Force Awakens trailer dropped was people started making racist jokes at John Boyega's expense, with it continuing to harass people like Daisy Ridley and Kelly Marie Tran. And this is the weird cycle where it's like they harass these girls. The girls go, hey, I don't like this harassment. Then the harassment extends further because it's like, they're calling out us. They're making us mad. And then there's also this added trend of like just fucking like brain dead nonsense. Like one big thing that I kept hearing a lot was this so-called civil war in Star Wars. So to the point where it's like literally just a thing that people think. That there is a civil war in Star Wars. That Dave Filoni is actually secretly working behind the scenes to like ruin Kathleen Kennedy's vision of Star Wars because her vision is so wrong. Even though it's like, guys, she's a producer. She's a producer. That's her job. She's a producer. She doesn't have that much involvement with the story, guys. Like, not really. I mean, she has some involvement, but the problem is, like she has basically the same amount of involvement with, like, all the Star Wars products. But, like, this is one thing I point out. I point out how she got all the shit for hating, like, she got all the shit for, like, The Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, and The Force Awakens. She got shit for that. But then when the Mandalorian came out, she got no shit. Because they liked The Mandalorian. They didn't go, wow, Kathleen Kennedy was really good, even though she had the exact same role on all those products. And, like one of the channels that I didn't want to name him necessarily, but, like, one of the channels I did like, Bandit Incorporated, the one who made the remade prequel trilogy. He was one of two people that made a remade prequel trilogy, but his ones that I liked. But almost every video that he made was like a video, almost every video in between that, it was literally a video of him like shitting on Kathleen Kennedy, like, and he would just flat out make things up. I think there's literally a video on his channel where he makes the claim that Kathleen Kennedy was fired. She's not fired. She isn't fired. She still maintains her job at Lucasfilm. And that's another problem, where they would, like, make the claim that Kathleen Kennedy's fired. She's not fired the next day. Or they claim, like, we're done with Star Wars. Then the next day, they upload 3 more videos about Star Wars. And, like, this is just basically what all the Star Wars fandom is. So I just kind of left, all the channels that were like that, I just kind of unsubscribed. So I basically unsubscribed from Bandit. And, I mean, there were other Star Wars channels that I did subscribe to briefly, but then I kind of, like, left. You know, I didn't really care about them that much because a lot of them was like kind of like basic like random like facts about Star Wars. Like, here's this random character from like this random comic book, and while sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it's like I don't care. And I didn't really get involved with a lot of the new Star Wars stuff because it's just like the new Star Wars YouTube channels or anything like that, because it's like I can't risk it. Like, I mean, there are a lot of YouTube channels that even now, like there was one Star Wars YouTuber named Kyle Katarn. I was just like, even though I think all he does is like basically reaction videos, I would watch some of his reaction videos, but I was like afraid to do anything more. Every time a new video of his will get recommended to me on YouTube, I would like click hide. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know what he's up to. Because, I don't know, was he one of those guys? And what's worse is like, it's very obvious that they were just doing it to spread like a reactionary political agenda. Like, that's very obvious what it is. And I want no part about that. And that's one of the biggest problems. All this media stuff will sometimes just get like super, like just random reactionaries will just randomly jump on it for no reason. Like, I mean, back in the older days, I used to be able to just say like, yeah, fuck Taylor Swift. Now I can't say that because people think I'm a fascist for saying it. Because it's like, fascists just jumped on Taylor Swift and like started hating on her because she's like a Democrat. It's like, this isn't anything surprising. What is this? How is this surprising? And then it's like, oh yeah, just making the claim that Travis Kelce and like, there's this weird thing where it's like, everyone just likes to shit on like Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's relationship, even though there's like, as far as I can tell, there's been nothing wrong with it. Yes, I know Taylor Swift has a reputation of like, oh, that was her, like that was the joke about Taylor Swift a lot, where it's like she dates someone, breaks up with them, and then does that. But it's like, I don't think she's made a breakup song in a long period of time. Just move past it already. Now, I think before anybody I think people would like to hear this, because since I'm talking about Star Wars anyways, why not just actually give my actual perspectives on Star Wars? You know, like not just the franchise as a whole, but like, you know, at the very least, like the major pieces of media in the Star Wars franchise. So we're just going to go over like the movies, main TV shows, etc. You know, just before anybody starts trying to make some claims about my perspectives on some of these Star Wars products. So let's just get into it, because I'm going to give some takes that are going to be hot regardless of your previews. Alright, so first, A New Hope. We're going to start with A New Hope because that's the first movie. I don't care what anybody says. New Hope is the first movie. It's good, and I love it. It's a really good movie. I like it. It's I mean, what else is there to say? It's good, and I like it. Empire Strikes Back, amazing film. It's quite literally amazing. Basically S tier. I can completely understand why people call it the best Star Wars film, because quite genuinely, I see it. Like, I mean, I try to even make this perspective where it's like, in my opinion, it's not the best Star Wars film. Or, okay, I guess I should rephrase that. It's not my favorite Star Wars film, but probably in the most practical sense, it is the best. That's kind of like the division between like a fan's mind and a critic's mind. Return of the Jedi is my personal favorite Star Wars film. It's quite literally, in my opinion, my favorite, and in my opinion, the best. Granted, part of the reason why I thought it was the best was like taken away from me with the creation of the sequel trilogy and etc. But, you know, I like it. I think it's great. Phantom Menace. Good, but not great. Far from great, but good. I have fond memories of it, and when I rewatched it, I thought it was fine. There were a lot of moments that I was like, I could like do without it. Like, I'll be real, the pod race scene drags too long. If the pod race scene was either shorter, or it kind of like, or if it kind of like streamlined it a bit, maybe have a different resolution on how Anakin was there. Also, I'll say hiring Jake Lloyd as Anakin kind of like really just doesn't sit right with me. There's a lot of like really weird issues in regards to like this relationship. Like, Anakin being so young is weird. And then also the fact that the Jedi consider him too old to enter into their cult is just weird. There's a lot of very common jokes about Anakin being groomed by both the Jedi and Padme, because Padme is 14 years old and she's looking at Anakin and she's being like, huh, yeah, nice. It's like, really? Really? And the fact that The Phantom Menace is so removed from the rest of the prequel trilogy kind of negates it. Also, the fact that they killed Darth Maul, that kind of like was one of the, a lot of the biggest problems with it. Like, I mean, that's the problem with it. There are a lot of problems with it, but I do like it. If they just change some of those things, yeah, and I'll be upfront, I kind of copy-pasted and incorporated and literally made ideas for how I would rewrite the prequel trilogy. I haven't released them, I don't think I ever will, but there's some interesting ideas that I had that are both unique from his and also unique from the original trilogy. It could use work because it was a first draft when I was a bit younger, but like, yeah, it could work. Attack of the Clones, I don't really like it that much. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of boring to me. It's just really boring. And there are a lot of things, it just doesn't, when I rewatched it recently, it was just like, it was after I took in the vitriol of like all the anti-prequel hate, and then I took in like the re-love of the prequels that has been coming around recently, and then I came into like all those perspectives in mind, and when I finally watched it, it's just like, it's just weird and boring to me. Revenge of the Sith, it's almost great. It's almost great. It almost hits the mark. There are a couple moments, like, I mean, again, I took in the hate of it when it first came in. When I watched it when I was a kid, was completely like, you know, enamored with it because I was a Star Wars nerd. That was like anything with Star Wars on it, I was in love with. But then I took in the prequel hate. Then I took in the prequel re-love, and then I was like, okay, let's see it again. And it's like, I can get it. I see it. I see what works. I see what doesn't. And of the three prequels, at the very least, this one has more in it that works than doesn't work, because they allowed much more of like other things that, like, again, there was a lot more in it that worked than didn't. Like, I wouldn't say it's great. It's good. It's very close to being a good movie, or at the very least, like, good. I think when I put it on my tier list, I put it in like a C rank, or at least a C, or maybe I made it a C plus rank, or like a B. I don't know, but like, it's lower than the original, but it is higher than the rest of the prequels. Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the movie. Honestly, I liked it. It's not that good. That's because, again, it's rough. It's rough animation that wasn't made for movie theaters, and it was clearly meant to be a couple episode plot line in the TV show. And if you're going to rework it to be a movie, it should have at least like done certain things to be different. Although I kind of know why it didn't do certain things. I might get into it in this podcast, I might not. You might be able to leave a comment to explain what I'm talking about. But yeah, otherwise, But the show, Star Wars The Clone Wars, absolutely phenomenal. No notes. Next. Rebels. Good, albeit but a rough start. Like, it had a rough start. Granted, I was older. Like, it's basically the experience that a lot of people had with the Star Wars The Clone Wars TV show. But since I was younger when that came out, I was able to be enamored with it fully through. But with Rebels, since I was older, I was like, okay, it's rough, especially considering it wasn't Clone Wars. But then once it finds its footing, it goes with it. The Force Awakens, good, roughly the same. It's on the same level as A New Hope at most. And we can see why. We know why. The two films are kind of identical. I will say, there is a very badass moment in that movie that I'm just like, this is great. I love this scene. It takes all of the things that you learned from the prequel trilogy. It's like, yeah, we had our rough patch with the prequels. Now we can, like, revamp it and fix it. We got this better. And it gives you just enough of that old school Star Wars feel that it's like, it's enough new, enough old, enough to make it, like, palatable and nice. The Last Jedi, hot take, extremely hot take, third best Star Wars movie. Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, Last Jedi. It is top 3. No ifs, ands, or buts. There were a lot of things that happened in this movie that I was happy about. I was like, yes, it did this. I love that they did this. I sure hope nothing happens in the future that changes this from being canon. Rise of Skywalker. I'll just put it in this perspective. I have seen all of the Star Wars films at least twice, with the exception of The Rise of Skywalker. I saw it in theaters, and I really do not have intentions of seeing it again. The only time I will watch it again is if I have to show my younger relatives Star Wars related stuff. But again, I'll make it so that one's last. So it's like that's the last one. It's just like I guess I'll just say it. It's shit. It's terrible. I hated it. It was the only Star Wars movie ever that I legitimately, like, walked out, I'm like, I hate this. Like, if I didn't have social anxiety, I would have asked for the teller for my money back. Because it's just so bad. I wish there was, like, a camera that was pointing at me when I was watching it. Because I genuinely... It was so... And it's worse because, like, literally when it began, I was happy because I thought it was like, okay, I think I get it now. And then it's just like, no, literally nothing. And I don't even remember what happens in it, really. I remember kind of what happens in it, but not really. But anyways, I guess let's move on to the Disney shows. I just talked about the Disney shows. These ones are going to be faster. The Mandalorian, 100% great. Absolutely no notes. Yes, even the other 2 seasons, I'll admit, the other 2 seasons weren't as good as the first one. It literally goes like, season 1 was great, season 2 was great, season 3 was good. It was pretty good. I liked it. But again, I think it's great. Best live action Star Wars show by far. Bad Batch, great. Wonderful continuation of the Clone Wars story with these new characters. My only problem is that Echo wasn't in it as much. And also, one of my other favorite characters from this show specifically wasn't in it that much. If you know, you know. Wink, wink. Star Wars Visions. I liked the first season. The episode quality would shift drastically, but otherwise it was fine. I will say the one episode that got a lot of love was the fucking samurai inspired one. And I didn't really like that episode. And the last episode of season 1 was trash. I didn't really like it at all. But a lot of the other episodes were pretty good. But I kind of got bored with the first episode of the second season, so I just didn't watch it. The Book of Boba Fett. The 2 Mandalorian episodes were pretty great. Otherwise, I mean, it had potential, but unfortunately, it just didn't really see it. Obi-Wan Kenobi. I liked aspects of it, but there were so many parts of it that just dragged on and on and on. It should have been a movie. It really should have been a movie. I mean, to the point where I was doing research for this episode, and literally I saw like there was, or not necessarily for this episode, for like a completely different video. I saw like it was like I was doing research for like a video about copyright, and then I was looking up some like Star Wars like fan recreations, and then I saw a link, like a Wikipedia thing that explained like there was a edit of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show that edits it into like an hour-long movie, and it's like to the point, yeah, it just should have been a movie. It really should have been. There's so much that should have been in the Obi-Wan show that unfortunately, like, due to other, like, finagling and problems with the, like, Star Wars stuff, were unfortunately just not gonna happen. I'm sorry. I mean, and, like, there's some people that really wish, like, there was, like, a Maul returning, but, like, yeah, Maul returning for the Obi-Wan Kenobi show would have been good, but the problem is, well, due to other finagling, they wrapped up his story in a different series because they thought that they were never gonna get a chance to do his story again. Ahsoka, it was good, but it kind of felt empty. Like, one big problem I had with it was that a couple of times when I was watching it, I was really just like, isn't this supposed to be a Ahsoka show? Because, yeah, Ahsoka, if I remember correctly, this show was more about Sabine than it was about Ahsoka. And there were some elements of it that were kind of cool and were really interesting, but, I mean, otherwise it kind of felt empty. Especially at the ending where it was just like, what? And we have to wait like 2 more years for it to finally be resolved, I think. It might be resolved, I don't know. The way streaming services work are just so fucking weird. Tales of the Jedi. I liked it. I liked the Dooku elements of it. The Ahsoka elements I didn't really like that much. Andor. I'm gonna be interesting and say this. It's phenomenal, but if you subscribe to me on Patreon, you know that I didn't think that at first. For the first couple of episodes, I genuinely did not like Andor, and I thought that it was trash. But then, as the show continued, like, it just starts picking up momentum, and it's just like, guys, I'm being serious. If you are watching Andor and you're like, man, this is kind of slow, finish it. Finish the first season. Trust me. If you don't like the first season, then not my apologies. But genuinely, the show, it just blows it out of the water. I could literally just do a smash cut of like the 2 reactions of like the beginning of like literally the first couple of episodes, like, this show's so fucking boring. But then at the end, I'm just like, holy fuck, that's amazing. I was on the edge of my seat. I was like shaking. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I love this show. And these aren't shows, but like the 2 movies, the 2 spin-off movies. Solo, I didn't see it and I didn't really care. They killed Han Solo in The Force Awakens. Spoiler alert, by the way. So I was just like, I don't really care. I don't really care about like the past. Like, I mean, because I'll be real, I don't like the concept of prequels. Because like, if you thought that story was interesting, you would have just told that story. The only way a prequel can work is if you do it in a way that is different enough that it that it is good and interesting, or that something big has to happen in it that you don't know about. And the thing about the Star Wars prequels in general is just that a lot of the stuff just kind of falls in. Like, the Star Wars prequel, it just kind of falls into place and just kind of just goes that way. Like, I mean, Bannon Incorporated, spoilers for his, like, Phantom, like, his, like, prequel trilogy, like, making, is that he literally makes it so that Luke and Leia have a 3rd sibling. Like, could you imagine if you were just sitting down, watching Revenge of the Sith, and then literally, they're just like, it's like, man, Padme's beautiful child is born. It's like, they're operating, they saved babies. Babies? Twins? No. Triplets. Or something like that. I mean, wouldn't that have been blown out of your fucking mind? Or maybe it's like, a character is born, it's like, wait, why is there only one child? Where's Leia? And then you realize, that's not Luke or Leia. That's a 3rd child. What? Not to say that wouldn't have been receiving some criticism in and of itself. It probably would have. But I'm just saying, wouldn't it have been more interesting if something like that happened? Or if it did like a more proper explanations of a lot of things? Like, why does Yoda have a cane if he could literally just like do all these kicks and flips and shit? Why does he need a cane for? Wouldn't it have been better if they used that prequel trilogy to explain how did Yoda get there? Instead of explaining, oh yeah, C-3PO was created by Anakin. It's like, really? That's the thing you choose to explain? Not how does Sifo-Dyas fit in with this plan of the clones, but, oh, we need to figure out how he fucking got that gold plating. And another thing is like, but like, the Owen Beru thing is just so lazy. It's just so lazy. Oh my god, I'm rethinking it, and it's just so fucking lazy. Just like Anakin just shows up at his house. He's like, "Hey, my mother was a slave. You guys bought her. Oh yeah, my name is Owen, and this is my girlfriend, Beru. I guess I am your stepbrother." And it's just like, yeah. And they trust him so much. They trust Owen so much, despite the fact that he literally has met Anakin once in his entire lifetime, that they're just gonna bring him over to him instead of Obi-Wan watching him. Why not? At that point, why not Obi-Wan just watch him? Because that's not how the original trilogy worked. I could just rant about that a lot, but I'll just move on. I guess, did I say Rogue One? Oh, wow. Rogue One. I didn't watch it because I didn't care about it at the time. Now that I watched Andor, I'm actually going to keep holding off on it until after Andor finishes. And hour in, let's just talk about this, because I'll be upfront about this, because this is going to be very weird, especially considering the controversy. And let's talk about The Acolyte. I haven't seen The Acolyte. If you're a fan of this channel, you know that I had a very big project that I was working on, and it kind of coincided with Acolyte's like release date and like all that stuff, and I was busy working on that, so I kind of just like held off on like watching a lot of these shows. Plus, I also, similar to Andor, I kind of just waited for the audience reaction first. Like with The Mandalorian, I didn't wait for audience reaction. I watched that shit immediately. I'm grateful I did, especially considering that big fucking twist at the end. But that's because I was very much interested in the concept and the idea of behind The Mandalorian. I was interested in the concept and the idea behind the Book of Boba Fett. I was interested in the concept and the idea behind Obi-Wan. I was interested in the concept and the idea of the Bad Batch. Ones that I wasn't necessarily too sure about, Andor and the Acolyte. I mean, I was kind of interested in the Acolyte. I wasn't interested in the like High Republic era because I haven't really seen or heard of any of the media in regards to the High Republic, because they made all their media books and like comics, and it's like I'm not gonna read a book or a comic. I don't care. I'm busy. And basically what I decided to do was I decided to wait and watch for the fan reaction. Wait for all the vitriol on either side of on the conflict to die down. And I've done that for a lot of more recent products, like the Marvels. When it first came out, everybody hated it. And then the vitriol died down, and a lot of people are now saying it's a hidden gem. I still haven't seen Miss Marvel or the Marvels. I mean, I saw Miss Marvel, the TV show, but I have not seen the Marvels. And I haven't seen a lot of other things. Because, yeah, I'm just kind of busy. It just kind of doesn't work. But, like, regardless, I was like, you know what? I will inevitably watch The Acolyte. And like 2 weeks ago, I did watch the first episode. I finally did check out the first episode. I was just like, you know what? Fine. I'll finally watch the first episode. And I'll admit, it was kind of rough. And my philosophy for a lot of these TV shows, especially in the streaming sphere, is basically this. You get one episode. If you don't intrigue me in that one episode, you're not going to be watched anymore. And this series was so close to getting kicked off. I was interested enough to possibly watch more episodes. I was interested enough to like watch it. But the only reason why I was so mad about not continuing it was purely because there was a specific trope in the first episode that I was genuinely just infuriated by. And for those who don't know, the trope is, I mean, and again, spoilers, I should probably say, this is going to say spoilers for a lot of Star Wars material, but like, in the first episode, one of the characters is revealed to be a twin, and like they don't like reveal it. Like the first, I'll just say it. The first episode begins with the main villain of the show killing a Jedi, and then you see a character that looks like the villain working on a spaceship, and then you're confused because she's like not acting anything remotely like she did in the last scene, and then we find out in the scene one character goes, it's been a while. I know you haven't been the same since your sister died. And it's like, oh, they're sisters, of course. Because the villain character had a tattoo on their face, and then this character does not have a tattoo on their face. It's like, okay, I guess it's the sister. But nobody believes her. She's like, hey, I didn't do it at all. They're like, yeah, but you do. The person who killed them did look just like you, so we're gonna take you in. It's like, but guys, I have a twin sister. It's like, yeah, but she's dead. It's like, I mean, You're going to entertain the possibility that it might be the twist? Like, they could have at least had a line where the fucking character was like, hey, you know what? Yeah, that might be an idea, but we're gonna bring you in for questioning just so we can clear the air. Like, something that even remotely indicates like they have some element of believing her. And I just point like that. If this episode ends and they don't fucking believe her, I'm not watching the show anymore. And then one of the characters is like, I believe you. It's like, fine. You know what? Fine. I will continue watching the show. But this show got a lot of controversy before the show even came out. Like, see, when the show was first pitched, it was like, oh, this is interesting, because I think if I remember correctly, they just pitched the name and nothing else. So it was kind of left in the air to figure out, like, what does this mean? But then they showed what this meant, and there were some people that were a bit interested, and some were a little bit concerned, particularly because of one huge attack against the showrunner, ᵏⁱณᵃ, because she, quote, wasn't a real Star Wars fan, and she was quoted as saying that she used her art to make men uncomfortable. And these are some things I have to say about that. First of all, I learned very recently that last part was, I knew that the second part wasn't in reference to the Acolyte, even if it was, I didn't really care, but if it wasn't. It was based on a film that was literally about killings in Pakistan. It was literally based on Pakistani honor killings about, like, females. And it's like, yeah, sure. The intention of this is to make the men uncomfortable in the audience. And then, here's another problem. Here's another thing. So what? So what if she's not a fan? That's literally the thing. Like, you don't have to be a fan of Star Wars to be an actor and act in Star Wars. I know this. Like, you don't need to be an actor to, like, you don't need to be a fan of Star Wars to act in Star Wars. You don't need to be a fan of Star Wars to write Star Wars. You just need to catch yourself up before you make the product. Although, granted, there's a lot of things you need to catch up on, because this was supposed to be a brand new era of Star Wars. Like, quite literally, this takes place in the High Republic, the era 100 years before the Galactic Republic. It is literally so removed that literally anything could happen in it. That's kind of the point of making Star Wars films, like, so far in the future and so far in the past. Like, just, you could do literally anything you want. It's not going to affect the Skywalker saga continuity. But, like, yeah, this is, and I know this isn't a problem, because there have been actors who've never been fans of Star Wars that have given great performances. Daniel Logan, when he first started, he was the only, like, I mean, it was a common joke. Like, it was a joke by Hello Greedo. It was like, man, they found the one kid in the universe that hasn't seen Star Wars. And it's like, yeah, who cares? He gave a decent performance in the film, and when he returned in the Clone Wars, he did a great job as Boba Fett. And Bill Burr notoriously hates Star Wars, and literally gave one of the best fucking performances in Star Wars history, at least in the sequel era. Like, none of this is really inherently a bad thing. A new face giving fresh ideas to an almost 50-year-old intellectual property? Good. Who cares? This sounds great. I love this idea. New people coming in. This isn't a bad thing. New Star Wars fans. New people bringing new ideas to this franchise, to revitalize it, to make it better. It's like, to offer new perspectives. That's the beauty of Star Wars. There are so many people with so many fucking ideas that have been able to do so many things with it. Star Wars Visions was literally made with the intention of, like, you could set any story in the Star Wars universe. You could do anything with the Star Wars property. It doesn't matter. We don't care. Just do something interesting. And that's beautiful. And that's why Visions was so great. And I want more of that. I want new ideas. How is this a bad thing? New ideas, new concepts, new interesting things. Like, I want them to, like, move forward with the franchise. I literally want them to, like, make the stories after this. Make the stories after the sequel trilogy. Just tell more stories in the future so that they're new, fresh. They don't rely on the past. And it's one of the major problems with it. Because since The Acolyte is a prequel and not a sequel, it literally, a lot of people got mad at it because it doesn't necessarily fit in, quote unquote, with the franchise as it is. Which is like, great, then why didn't they set it in the fucking future so that we could move it past it? And here's one big controversy that happened in it that kind of like showed it. There was one big thing that was spoiled to me in The Acolyte, and that was the revelation that ᵏⁱณᵃ is going to be in the show. Now, that's a problem, as I said before, because according to an old CD-ROM, and was introduced in, like, the fucking Star Wars database, ᵏⁱณᵃ is 60 years old by the time that The Phantom Menace comes out. and Phantom Menace is his first appearance in the Star Wars franchise. Which means that according to the Star Wars lore and Star Wars canon, ᵏⁱ̬ᵈᵃ must have been born in the year 93 BBY, 93 years before the Battle of Yavin, because that's apparently how they measure time in Star Wars for some reason. I don't think that's how they measure time in universe, but I think that's just the way for the people in the audience to get how time works. But this is one big problem. As I mentioned before, this show is pitched to have been taking place at the very least 100 years before the Phantom Menace. So it is not possible for it to happen. And when the Star Wars Wikipedia, decided to change the date of his birth to accommodate this new canon, they sent the editor death threats, and one editor openly called out the people sending the other person death threats. However, that broke that broke the rules of the site, so they ended up getting fired. And sadly, this isn't new for Star Wars, but the internet has, of course, made it 10 times worse. And I guess I can finally use this to transition into the controversy that has started this entire thing. And this whole thing building has just kind of made me just go fucking insane. The main actress in The Acolyte, Amanda Stenberg, recently released a video where she talked about the cancellation of the show. I should mention, Acolyte got canceled. Even though it was like this great new idea, new concept, new interesting things, even though it's kind of rough, it got canceled. It's kind of like a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag on how this works. Because it's like, if truly the quality, I guess I can't really make a testament about whether or not it's canceled or not, like about the reason for its cancellation. Because some people say that it's because of the vitriol against it, some people say it's because of low viewership, whatever it may be. Since people are so enthused about the idea of, the Acolyte getting into the season, my guess is they did not finish the story. And that's the one criticism I can levy. Like, they should at the very least be given the chance to finish the story that they set up. And when, they asked Amanda for her take on the cancellation, and she made a video where she basically explained that she wasn't really surprised at the show's cancellation due to the heavy vitriol levied towards the show from bad faith toxic fans, particularly going into harassment that she had faced based on her race, but also being thankful to Star Wars fans who did give her a chance to express her opinions and give her a chance to be part of the franchise. And that is when a YouTube channel by the name of Star Wars Theory stepped in, posting a reaction video where he basically painted her in the worst light ever. The video was entitled Amanda Stenberg Meltdown Over the Acolyte Cancelled Response. Even though it was literally the calmest video ever made the claim that she was calling all Star Wars fans alt-right incels, and basically tried to downplay the harassment of her and many others in production. Now, to those of you who do not know who this person is, Star Wars Theory, or ᵏⁱᵈᵃ, is a Star Wars YouTuber. Actually, scratch that. Not just a Star Wars YouTuber, but the largest Star Wars YouTuber on the site. As his name suggests, he started out simply making Star Wars theories, mostly revolving around the sequel trilogy. But after a bit, he changed his content to be more of a reactionary review type thing. Remember the shift that I talked about before when I was talking about Star Wars YouTubers? This dude is 100% the epitome of that. Quite literally. Literally, if you just close your eyes and envision the kind of fan that type of content is, he is the type of person that it is. If I had known this guy's existence prior, I would have put him in the thumbnail instead of putting Geeks and Gamers and Bandit Incorporated and fucking Quartering. Even though those guys are probably basically in the same format as him, the fact that Star Wars Theory is the biggest Star Wars YouTube channel makes it 10 times more interesting to point out. Aside from the very off chance I might have been subscribed to him briefly, when I was just kind of focusing on finding random lore. I might have seen videos of his occasionally, but not when he became this. Apparently it's a common story for people to hear, where they were just subscribed to Star Wars Theory because, again, the name's just, they thought they were going to get Star Wars theories, but then it's oh no, they got whatever the hell he makes now. I first heard of him by name with his interaction with a controversy that he had with Pablo Hidalgo, a Lucasfilm creative executive / Star Wars lore advisor, after he posted a video of him bawling his eyes out at the Mandalorian Season 2 finale. He's like he was crying his eyes out over the Mandalorian Season 2 finale. I'll be real, I didn't really have that much of an impact on the Mandalorian Season 2 finale because certain elements of it were spoiled for me, like the fact that Luke was going to be in it. I didn't know that he was going to take away Grogu. That was good. I mean, scratch that. Like, I just find it, and I will say, just that build-up and that payoff was just fucking fuck. And then after, like, but back to Star Wars Theory, he made a video where he posted it, he was like crying about it. He's like, thank you, Lucasfilm. That's exactly what 6-year-old me wanted to see. And it's like, that's kind of a bit of a problem for a lot of reasons. But Hidalgo responded with, emotions should not be shared. Okay. But otherwise, I didn't really know much about him and didn't really care to learn much about him. And only afterwards, I started seeing like some people posting about him, and none of it was positive. Talked about how basically, like, he became a huge talking point in the Star Wars fandom because of his incredibly bad takes. And his review of Andor basically solidified his fucking bad takes. First of all, there's apparently a part of his, like, reaction to Andor where he claimed that they didn't, like, that Star Wars, like, didn't have bricks. He's like, Star Wars doesn't have screws. They don't have bricks. It's like, what? And there's like a fucking like pretty common like meme video where it's like, it just points out literally every single screw and brick that has ever existed. In the prequels, there are bricks. Theed is made of bricks. But these two clips are parts of his Andor review that really just kind of like solidify like a really stupid point.
The most important characters in Star Wars, but let's just literally give them the bare minimum, but focus all of our attention in Andor, which, yes, Andor is a great show for everyone who attended film school and wants to eat their cheese with a French hat so they can twiddle their mustache at the same time and talk about the Renaissance era and how great things were back then while they sip on their wine from 1922. Okay, don't get me wrong. I liked Andor. I liked it. It was a good show. It was fine. It was cozy. It was also extremely boring and made me fall asleep a million times while I was watching it.
First of all, you're just gonna leave in you saying Ambor? Oh, no, fuck. Now I get it. I get it now. I thought he was mistaken. I thought it was a joke and he was like, I thought he was mistaking it, but no, he's making the joke that Andor is boring. It's like, second of all, it's like, I gotta be real. You're an adult man and you literally fell asleep watching a movie, a show. Even if it's boring, I just turn it off. I don't fall asleep unless I'm like tired. And when I say tired, I mean like actually tired, like when I'm exhausted and I wake up or like something. And also that like fake like thing at the where it's like, oh yeah, it's good for people who like wear berets and have mustaches and want to talk about the Renaissance and how great the Renaissance was. It's like, would people like that, like the Renaissance? Wouldn't they prefer like a different art period? Like if you're trying to make a point, like it's just so stupid. The point just doesn't make any sense. Again, it's just because he just is bored about Andor, even though Andor is like literally, it's one of the fucking dumbest things. Like it's the one time that I've seen the Star Wars fan be like, we actually agree on something for once, and it's just like, nope, bad. And here's another thing that kind of like made me even more angry.
And we're all just standing around like, hey, it's okay. We got Andor. Andor's the best Star Wars we've ever... It's not. It's Blade Runner with a Star Wars theme. It's not bad. I love Blade Runner. Go to my Theory Talks channel. I'm always playing Blade Runner music. But that doesn't mean it's a good show for Star Wars.
First of all, Blade Runner served as an inspiration for Star Wars. A lot of elements from Blade Runner were incorporated in the Star Wars prequels and all the movies after its release. And this guy loves the prequels. He loves the prequels. This dude is a fucking prequel fanatic. And he doesn't understand that the prequels took inspiration from Blade Runner. And is so confused about the concept. Like, how could something like Blade Runner be in Star Wars? It's like, fucking, how would you, and the second thing is that this is the same guy these are the same types of people. I don't know if this guy specifically does this, but like, these are the same type of people that be like, as far as away, it's a little too close to fucking like to the original trilogy. And then that someone goes in a completely new direction for Andor. It's like, it's like, I'm literally just like, what the fuck do you want? What do you want? That's one of the biggest problem with a lot of these Star Wars fans. They just want to bitch and moan. That's all they want to do. They want to bitch and moan. That's all they want to fucking do. You rehash Star Wars previously, it's bad. You make new things, it's bad. What the fuck do you want? He also got involved in a heap of other controversies, including, but not limited to, the time he stole Mark Hamill's likeness to be used in an AI-generated film. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Star Wars Theory likes to make fan theories, like a fan films too, like when he started making fan theories, and now he just makes fan fiction in the movie. And it's not even like, it's just fucking weird. Like, there was another thing where it's like his Darth Vader fan film got into a lot of copyright issues because he like was making a lot of like it used a lot of like Star Wars sound like music, and he's just like, yeah, whatever. It's like the dude is infringing on the copyright, so he's like, I guess it's like one thing, he's just open about like, yeah, I did infringe on the copyright, so I guess it makes sense. But now his most recent one is literally like, it's so stupid. His most recent idea, his new idea, it's like, because there's gonna be a part 2 to it, and it's called the Amethyst Blade, and it's about how Anakin's gonna fight Mace Windu as Darth Vader, and it's like, wait, and this guy shit on the fact that somehow Palpatine returned, yet somehow Mace Windu returned. And it's another thing I just hate about like a lot of modern day fucking like fandoms is this unwilling accepting of death and dying. Like, for some reason, now there's this new trend in media where a lot of people like just like to imagine that all their characters just live. Where these characters, like, even though they're like an on-screen character death, they just come back. Spoilers for the Bad Batch, but Tech died, and everybody was thinking, alright, when's Tech coming back? And I was so happy that Tech stayed dead. He's my favorite character. He's my favorite of the Bad Batch aside from Echo. And I was ecstatic that he stayed dead. Cause it's like, yes. This notion that like, oh, we didn't see a body. That's what I'm gonna do. Every time, if I ever make it into the business, I'm going to give every single character that I make fucking the most absolutely gruesome deaths you could ever imagine. Just so I could literally be like, you can't say that they're not dead. Like, I think almost every franchise should get one fake out death, but it has to be like an explicit, like, not that the character gets stabbed in the heart and dies, and it's just like, oh wait, they came back to life. It's like, no, like, I want it to be like, oh, everyone thinks they're dead, but then it's not, they're not really dead. And Star Wars Theory has kind of done this as well. Like, I mean, as I showed you, he did it with Mace Windu, but like, there's another part. He did a reaction, if I remember correctly, he did a reaction on Ahsoka, and in the Ahsoka thing, for some reason, he was convinced Darth Maul was going to come back. It's like, they already did his fake out death, and he died again. This show takes place long after he fucking dies. And he was literally just like, oh boy, Maul's coming back any second now. It's like, I guess it's another thing I have to get into. This whole weird spiel. I don't know if I've written notes about this in the past, in the future of this thing, but like, I just say this, like, there's this weird obsession with like this. I can't even put it into words because it's just so fucking stupid. It's this meme. There's a meme about this that literally explains it. It's like, Star Wars fans, how come the new trilogy didn't live up to my expectations? Their expectations, and it shows Darth Vader fighting Thanos. It's like, gee, I wonder why it didn't live up to your expectations. Unlike the rest of you fucking cretins, I go into things blind. Aside from the trailers, that's it. I watch the trailers. I don't watch any of the other things. I don't read any of the other things. I don't do any of that other stuff. I literally just watch the trailers, and that's it. I avoid everything else. Bruh, for The Mandalorian, I explicitly avoided any way to see Pedro Pascal's face. I did not want The Mandalorian's face to be ruined for me. I wanted, when the show felt ready to show me Pedro Pascal, I was gonna watch Pedro Pascal. I didn't care about, I literally tried my best to avoid Kylo Ren's actor. Because I was just like, I just want to see it when it comes out in the movie. But no, they want to read every single press release, every single thing, and then they want to like somehow piece together like, every single aspect of this movie. And then when they get their theory proven right, it's like, man, this shit sucked. It's like, gee, maybe you didn't like it because of the fact that you literally predicted the entire plot line of the movie. And another controversy that he got into was when he invited a relationship psychologist to his channel for an interview, where she stated that women wanted to be victims and that women didn't care about Star Wars. And then when that interview was shown, he blamed the quote-unquote extremist left for taking him out of context. The controversy got so big that the official Star Wars Twitter subtweeted him by saying Star Wars is for everyone. The first thing I want to say in regards to that is this. In 1977, a teenage girl named T.J. Burnside Clapp literally made an X-Wing pilot costume from scratch to wear to a Halloween party of that year. She went to the movie theater multiple times with a notepad to literally jot down exactly how she knew the pilots would look. Get the fuck out of here with that reactionary bullshit. And I mean reactionary in both a political sense, considering he's a supporter of Donald Trump, RFK Jr., Gina Carrero, Jordan Peterson, Pierre Poilievre, and Andrew Tate. But also in the sense that I've mentioned before with his weaponized nostalgia. Like, much like a lot of right-wing politics before and after with Gamergate, it's this weaponized nostalgia that is really weird. Like, I mean, remember, his whole spiel when he was like, when he was crying about like the fucking Star Wars thing, I was like, this is exactly what 6-year-old me wanted to see. Really? That's how you're basing your fucking like views on like media nowadays? What 6-year-old you wants to see? 6-year-old, there are things that 6-year-old me wanted to see that I'm never going to see. And that's fine. Who cares if Star Wars and Transformers don't meet up? That's purely the mind fantasy of a child. Why would that be a compelling story for a normal person to do? Like his fucking, like, again, weaponized nostalgia is just fucking stupid. And like all reactionary politics, they weaponize a nostalgia and a past that doesn't exist. And I'll prove you this by showing you this big tweet that he wrote. Keep in mind, I'm going to quote it exactly as written. Exactly as written. I'm not going to change anything, including the spelling and grammatical errors. This is why legends work. It always remained consistent with the first 6 movies. Now, doesn't even remain consistent with good storytelling, let alone with what George created. When you alter anything to do with the first 6 films, including key characters, it has to be thought out and very purposeful. Shills defending the Acolyte need to stop and think. Is this what George would have done? Am you defending this to appear to be a positive person? Do you understand the actual lore of Star Wars? Or are you just straight up shilling to get an RT from the SW Twitter account? Or be sent out to meet Dave? What's your incentive? Mine is to uphold George's story and not let it be defiled, spelled wrong, by who insult George. Want to take Star Wars for a joyride, slap their shit on it, and change it without adding to it. There is literally so much fucking wrong with that. And I know that because I've jotted down a ton of notes to show all of the things that are wrong with that. One, and this is a very interesting one. While I will say it is somewhat admirable to uphold the vision of a creative. That is a lot of what drives a lot of people. Like maintaining the vision of a creative figure. That is somewhat admirable. But you need to understand this. George sold Star Wars. He made the conscious decision to relinquish the franchise to someone else. If he wanted to keep the Star Wars franchise the way he envisioned it, he would have kept it and would have just delegated all the day-to-day stuff to other people. That would have been the easy route. Him maintaining his control over the Star Wars franchise and just letting Dave Filoni or someone else be the creative figurehead for the time being. But he didn't want to do that anymore. He wanted to move on and he wanted to do different projects. He wanted to get the money that he put into the franchise back and just move forward. He gave it to Disney specifically to give it new life, to give people a chance to make the franchise anew. Selling it to a multinational company, that's a little bit interesting. Not the greatest idea, not gonna lie. I mean, I think the only reason why he did it to Disney is because he knew Disney probably would give away the biggest check. But I mean, I will say this would have been funny, and this is one of my takes about copyright that is very interesting. Wouldn't it have been ballsy for George Lucas to literally say, hello guys, it's me, George. I'm here to tell you all that after all these years, I'm officially retiring as the head of Star Wars. Effective today, all of Star Wars will be in the public domain. Wouldn't it have been ballsy to just do that? Just yeah, you can make anything regarding to Star Wars. Cool, that would have been awesome. But that's Fantasyland. Basically, no creative figure is ever going to do that in their lifetime. And sure enough, he didn't. And he just decided to sell it to someone else. Let them hold the reins until the copyright expires, or when Disney figures out a way to make the copyright extended. But either way, yeah, it's not his baby anymore, so his vision of the franchise isn't needed. And this is another thing. This is one thing I genuinely hate about this new rise and prequel love. That rather than taking in the criticisms that the people who hated the prequels did, they instead basically just went back around. Guys, this is the thing. This sucking off of George Lucas is stupid. Literally, this is the thing. All these people who fucking love, this fucking, Star Wars thing, they just, suck George off relentlessly. To the point where they literally make, okay, let's just get back to, let me get back to the notes, because I might go off topic, not off topic, but, rambling. Okay. You need to understand, this deep-throating and bullshit hero worship of George Lucas led us down the dark path we are today. After the original trilogy, George Lucas was looked at as a fucking god. He was seen as, amazing, wonderful. Everything great about Star Wars was his doing, which led to him getting a big ego and surrounding himself by a bunch of yes men when he decided to make the prequel trilogy. And it was he rolled around without checks and balances that were sorely needed. Because if you do any research on George's original plan for Star Wars, let me tell you. Right here. I have the comic book, The Star Wars. This was George Lucas's, one of his original ideas for the fucking Star Wars. And this comic stinks. It's terrible. That is a draft that George went to fucking film directors and film producers and movie studios. He told people about that project. And they looked at him and told him, this is a stupid idea. We hate it. And then based on that feedback, he would go back and he would go, okay, let me rework that. Let me redo it. He changed some things, and then he went to other people, creatives, and they're like, hey, let's change this thing. They literally would change things. And one of the things that he's notoriously terrible at is writing dialogue. He suggested ideas that were torn down. And again, he was well known for his terrible writing and worse dialogue. Mark Hamill has told this story at every single press event where he was literally shooting a scene with George, and he kept begging George, please, George, don't make me say this line. And here's the story. Here's the dialogue. He basically explains, here's how it went. He was flying, originally the plan was, when they're like, that's no moon, that's a space station. Han Solo's supposed to turn to Luke and say, look, kid, I fulfilled my end of the bargain. I'm going to find an asteroid, and you and the droids and the old man are out of here. And then Luke turns to him and says, but we can't turn back. Fear is the greatest defense. I doubt if the actual security there is any greater than it was on Akalai or Sullust, and what is there is more than likely directed towards a large-scale assault. Luke was supposed to say that to Han as if it was something a normal person would say. And then Mark literally was just like, who talks like this, George? And Harrison Ford literally threatened to tie George up and force him to read his own dialogue because of how terrible it was. Gary Kurtz, one of his creative director friends, was literally believed to be the guy who carried the 2/3 of the original trilogy on his back, with him leaving on Return of the Jedi because Lucas got soft and was like, got more of a say on that one than the first two. And remember, back in the day, Return of the Jedi was considered the bad one. The one where George got more say on the story is the one where he is the one that was perceived as the bad one. And the prequels, where he got almost unlimited creative control, were also regarded as terrible when they came out. Now remember, I am a fan of Return of the Jedi. I consider it to be my favorite Star Wars film. But there are a lot of people that don't feel that way. And you can go towards each of the individual criticisms and address them as such. And notice how I said this. Like, I mean, and I fell victim to this. When I heard about the Gary Kurtz story, I was genuinely just like, I immediately shifted my goalposts, like, oh yeah, Gary Kurtz is missing. But it's like, no. George isn't the person who saved the entirety of the original trilogy. Gary Kurtz isn't the one who did it either. None of them did it. It is purely it is a collaborative work with many different writers, many different creatives behind the scenes. It is a big project. All these people work together. It's not one person's individual vision. And this hero worship is stupid. And yeah, there were people, the prequels didn't have people push back on them. Return of the Jedi, it did at least have some people who go like, some of these ideas don't necessarily work. But the prequels basically had no pushback. And guess what happened? They had shitty dialogue, they had less than stellar stories, they had a decent amount of plot holes, over-reliance on spectacle, negative critical reviews. Like, this notion, that's one thing I just don't understand about the prequel love now. It's not that, oh, we have a newfound appreciation of the prequels. It's that now all of a sudden, magically, they're like, oh, the prequels are amazing. I know why that is, but I'll get to that in a minute. But I just want to talk about the prequel era for a little bit. When I started getting involved in the Star Wars fandom, online, that was the time period where a majority of Star Wars fans, that was, remember, that period of time, 1999 to 2008-ish, I think 8 is around the time that it ended, but during that time period, or I guess 2011, because that's when Hello Grail kind of came around, but during that time period, a majority of Star Wars fans hated George Lucas, then liked him because of his shitty decisions on the prequels. And other shitty decisions that he made. Remember, this is the same guy who literally erased the original versions of the OG trilogy from existence and then decided to release shittier versions of it that changed his own vision of the franchise. Now, I'm no prequel hater. I acknowledge some of the positive things I've said about the prequels. Remember, I told you, I thought episode 1 was good and episode 3 was great. Or not great, but good. Good, above good, less than great. Whatever's in between that. But I'm not going to go back around and then go, oh, you see, actually the prequels were actually amazing and wonderful, and every single decision that was made is actually a good thing. No, it's not true. There are good and bad in all of the Star Wars films, minus episode 9 and... Okay, I guess I have to reword that. Honestly, I can't think of anything wrong with any of the original trilogy, and I can't really think of a lot of things that are right with episode 9. So basically, episodes 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8 have good things and bad things in it. One thing I genuinely... And there's one thing I got really weird. There was this one friend I had. They legitimately tried to argue with me about how Hayden Christensen's shitty acting in the prequel trilogy was actually good. Because it, stimulated Darth Vader's voice or some fucking reason. I don't know. This claim that George Lucas is this all-seeing God who can do no wrong, who's done everything amazingly wonderful, great, and has done all this stuff, is just fucking ludicrous and holding the franchise back. Not just in the sense that it leads to worse outcomes, but also simply because it does not allow the franchise to evolve. The inspiration behind Star Wars are film reels that George Lucas saw in the 40s and 50s when he was a kid, which gives us many of the iconic scenes and the iconic images from the original trilogy. But it also has some issues. One tweet thread or video that I saw literally complained about the fact that how all Star Wars dogfights are the exact same because they mimic that style. Viewpoint of the ship, cut to face, viewpoint of the ship shooting, cut to face, etc., etc. It's just that over and over again. There's no variety. Why do we have to rely on how George would shoot these scenes for this scene? Why can't we shoot it in a different way? What is the issue? The only film that did actually change how the fucking, like, franchise would fight and how this would work literally got panned by the audience. Fucking The Last Jedi. Where people point out the fact that, yeah, someone would think about the idea of, like, a ship flying through another ship. Why not? That's literally one of the best, interesting ideas ever. That makes sense. Why wouldn't that be anything ever thought of before? Because that's not how the franchise was written to have been done. And they're trying to rehash the same thing before. Like, George Lucas' inflated ego has it so that he genuinely believes that, all of everything, I made this up. This was the plan the whole time. That's just fucking untrue. A New Hope used to be the first film in the franchise, and then it magically became number 4. After Episode 6, there was going to be a completely different trilogy released afterwards. It was literally, the plan was, Episode 4 was going to be Episode 1, Episode 5 was going to be Episode 2, Episode 6 was going to be Episode 3, and then they were going to release a new trilogy after that. It was going to detail a completely new story. Vader wasn't planned to be Luke's dad. Luke and Leia weren't even supposed to be siblings. The sequel trilogy to the original trilogy was going to be based on fucking Luke's sister, who was going to be fighting against him because he was going to turn to be the Jedi villain. He was going to be the Sith Lord. There were so many concepts and ideas that have changed in the like, the notion that George Lucas had this planned is just fucking wrong, because there's so many different drafts, so many different things that happen. Remember, I have the comic that shows that he didn't plan this ahead. The next thing wrong with it is the fact that that's not how Legends worked at all. Mostly because of 2 things. 1, Legends didn't exist before the Disney buyout. It was called the Expanded Universe, you cretin. This is very common knowledge in the Star Wars fandom. I would assume that a person who's a big fan of the Star Wars channel as you are, you would probably know that. And the notion that George treated them like anything remotely above, like, any canon is just fucking ludicrous and wrong. Before Disney came out, there was literally a multi-tier canon list. Like, when the Disney, it's literally just, like, it's at most a 3-tier canon. For Disney, it's like all the, like, movies, TV shows, etc. Like, all the, like, the main 6 movies, like the Skywalker Saga, and all the other, like, franchise elements, like Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and all of the TV shows that they make. Then maybe in between you have, like, the comics and the books that can be changed, but, like, if they don't touch it, they don't really care. And lastly, you have Legends, which is basically everything that was made in, like, the books, the comics, etc., the video games, before the Disney buyout. But before the Disney buyout, there was a multi-tier canon list. There was G canon, which was essentially just the movies. George had a lot of control of the movies, ergo he considered them the complete canon. T canon, the TV shows, things that, like, the one that was, like, if it was more involved with George, then the more it was considered G. You know, one thing that is considered T canon would be Star Wars: The Clone Wars, but it was essentially considered G canon because George was very heavily involved with Star Wars: Clone Wars. C canon, which was basically considered canon. Like, I mean, it was, George considered it a separate universe, but he didn't consider it canon, but it was like a separate thing. But most of the fandom generally agreed that it was canon. Like, most of the fans generally agreed it was canon. And I think you could even divide this into multiple different types, because, like, I would argue that a lot of fans would consider things like The Force Unleashed and the Thrawn trilogy to be more canon than things that really just weren't canon. The S canon, which was basically everything that George directly contradicted. You know, a lot of things ended up here. I'll be real. Like, this is basically, if you were in the T canon or the C canon and got demoted because George contradicted you, you would end up here. In a very ironic sense, the Thrawn trilogy ended up being here due to the fact that it literally tells a story of the Clone Wars that is completely contradicted by the prequel trilogy and the, like, in the of course, the TV show. And then lastly, the Z canon. Things that were literally never intended to be canon. Old wounds, alternate video game endings, Ewoks, etc. And I guess the holiday special, I think it would count in here. I don't know. But, like, that's the thing. Like, if George respected it, why would he be so open to just openly contradicting it? But because he didn't respect it. It was just added things. If he wanted to, he could just change the canon. Like, and he changed a lot of things that were just fucking stupid. Like, he literally changed the entire perspective of a fucking video game, where it was going to be a story about Darth Maul in the past. And it was going to be this very interesting video game. Like, we're going to tell the story about Darth Maul in the past, and he was going to, like, do all these great things, and, like, all this other stuff. And then, literally, randomly, he sees in the background of this guy pitching it. He's not paying attention to what the guy's saying at all. And then he looks at the back and sees that he has a Darth Talon, like, model next to the Darth Maul model. And then he walks up to them, and then he points them at each other, and then kisses them. And then he's just like, look, they're friends. And then they're just like, George, she's from, like, 15 million years in the future. How could she be friends with Darth Maul? And he's like, make him clone. He's a clone of Darth Maul now. It's like, he doesn't even respect that. He doesn't respect him enough to even, like, look at their fucking video game idea. He just, like, makes it his own thing. This is a situation, again, that he, like, treated the expanded universe as anything more than just added things. Like, at most, he would look at names and then maybe, like, be like, I mean, even in the tweet that he acknowledged that, he's like, I just look at names and then do that. And that's the thing that they do. Like, they look at names and it's just like, On this notion, let me ask you a question. Do you remember Anakin Skywalker's close clone friend? Serving alongside him and Obi-Wan, stood toe-to-toe against Ventress and Grievous. Blue armor accents, pauldron on his shoulder, comma on his waist. Pretty good, pretty active member of the Clone Wars. Like he was a very active thing in the Clone Wars, like, stuff. What's his name again? Oh yeah, that's right. Alpha 17. Wait. You're telling me you don't remember Alpha 17? He's, like, literally one of the most important characters in Star Wars. He served as Anakin's best clone friend. He was a mainstay in the Dark Horse comics for a long period of time. Very vital to Anakin's story. Well, I mean, I guess you probably at least know, like, the bounty hunter that gave them a couple of trouble here and there during their Clone Wars adventures. You know, two guns, they were, like, really close. He fought Obi-Wan hand to hand, dude. That is no small feat. Yeah, who could forget Dirge? Wait, what do you mean you don't know who Dirge is? He was like, it was very vital in the fucking Clone Wars cartoon of 2003. Yeah, these are two very prominent characters in the Clone Wars era. But when George wanted to tell his own story about the Clone Wars adventures, he literally just wiped everything like that, just completely off the radar. Like, this is just so weird. Like, he literally wiped, like, the 2003 Clone Wars series, non-canon, all of Dirge's appearances, non-canon, Alpha just non-canon. In the comics, literally, he just disappears one day, and they never resolve it, because that's when George was like, I'm gonna make Clone Wars now. I'm gonna make Clone Wars cartoon now. Disney's continuity wipe was just more broad. And George has literally contradicted his own fucking movies. In the OG trilogy, it's very heavily implied that anybody can be a Jedi if they just focus and concentrate hard enough. It's the religion aspect. But then came midichlorians. Now that changed everything. And this is a two-part one that just genuinely fucking, like, infuriates me about this. Like, he claims he cares so deeply about George Lucas's vision, like, that he doesn't want them to taunt. He doesn't want them to taunt and, like, taint his imagery and ruin everything. Well, two things. One, where the fuck is your praise for this? The Star Wars. This is his original plan. This is his vision. The OG trilogy is a bastardization of his vision. Why aren't you clamoring for this to be adapted? Why aren't you saying, yeah, we should just get rid of the original trilogy and make this? You love Hayden Christensen so much? Well, I got bad news for you. He is a bastardization of George's original vision of Anakin Skywalker, because he wanted him to be Leonardo da fucking DiCaprio. Where's the clamoring to replace him with fucking Leo DiCaprio? Where's the plan? Why aren't you guys clamoring for that? That was his original vision. His original vision. That was his original vision. Because you don't care about his original vision. You guys don't care. You're just virtue signaling. And also, another thing about caring about his vision is, if you cared about his vision of the fucking Star Wars trilogies, then you like take the philosophy of it to heart and like all this stuff, and like you care so deeply about it. It's like, then why the fuck are you conservatives? Like, I mean, I genuinely, how can you look at this and then go like, Donald Trump, I support this guy. Dude, all 6 Star Wars films that George Lucas made were shitting on conservatives. George, Mark, Harrison, and Carrie, all vocal, loud Democrats that influenced their perspective on the trilogy. A lot of people like to give Mark Hamill shit for his political views nowadays, but dude, this has always been his views. This has always been Mark's views. What are you talking about? This is fucking like Harrison Ford's views. The Rebel Alliance is literally based on the Viet Cong. Literally, they told him, like, they literally had an interview with James Cameron. He's there just, yeah, what sort of your major inspiration? He's like, oh, the Viet Cong did. Back in the day, the Viet Cong were like this small group of rebels, and they defeated the largest empire in the world. That was the main inspiration behind the Star Wars franchise. It's like, hello, your Rebel Alliance is literally based on communist rebels, hello? And then you turn around and go, Donald Trump's the candidate for our future, my friends. The extreme left are trying to ruin Star Wars. Like, the extreme left built Star Wars, you idiots. The OG trilogy, Palpatine is literally an XP of Richard Nixon. Prequel trilogy Palpatine is literally an XP of Dick Cheney. Ironic that this episode comes out right after Dick Cheney made an apparent announcement about his endorsement for the next election. The prequel trilogy is literally a beat-for-beat history of the Iraq War, with him explicitly using an XP of the Patriot Act to say that democracy will fall. He used these films to claim that George W. Bush was going to secretly turn the United States into a fascist state. That is literally the intention of the movie. Literally, Jar Jar Binks gives him effectively the Star Wars Patriot Act. And democracy falls. That's literally what he did. And the Separatist Alliance is literally based on right-wing corporations that bought the U.S. into war. Halliburton, Dick Cheney's organization that he was a part of. Like, I'll be real, I genuinely think that Star Wars is the reason why I'm a fucking socialist. Because in retrospect, it's just like, having this franchise be what I liked just kind of like solidified it. I can't come to any other conclusion aside from that. Although granted, that it's just a lot of things I see nowadays where it's like, I genuinely just cannot fathom how people can come to any other conclusion on certain regards, but regardless. Now, I know that George and Hamill and all those other guys, they're not socialists. Like, but at the very least, you should be a fucking liberal if you're watching Star Wars. Like, literally. That goes double for nerds in general, because I don't necessarily understand why nerds in general become conservatives. I should rephrase that. I know why, but to my understanding, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, basically, like, how are nerds interpreted? How are nerds treated in society? The way nerds are treated by society is shitty. Mocking them for liking a comic book, movie, or nerd franchise, whatever. Mocking them for being socially awkward. Not being quote-unquote masculine enough. It's really bad, and I don't think that's good. Here's the difference between how it is. I look at that and go, I think we should change how society does things. How we view masculinity. And be more accepting of others that are different from us. And form a more perfect society based on that. Reactionary nerds simply want to perpetuate the system with them in charge. That's just kind of weird. Like, that's just kind of how it is. Like these guys don't want to be like, I want to make the world nice. They go, I want to be the bad person. I want to be the shitty person. I want to be the one that pushes other kids around. And in the most extreme case, we know where that leads. But we saw this with the skeptics and Gamergates. Like, I mean, I brought it up in my video where I talked about like the political like trends of the internet, where it's like the skeptics were like some like shy, nerdy like loners who liked video games, movies, etc. And they internalized their hatred to society based on the hatred of religion, and that's why they got to their views that they did. And then that's how I internalized it to be in that way. They want the world to be like them. They want to be the ones in charge. Not necessarily to fix the world, but because they want to be the ones in charge so that they can be the ones that push other people around. It's the same thing. I mean, it perplexes me. Like, why? Why is that the thing? Why don't you want to just change society so that we don't perpetuate this system anymore? It's the same thing with a lot of reactionary politicians who secretly are gay. Like, I mean, it's like, you'll find out, like, this Republican politician, like, secretly sucks cock in the bathroom every day. It's just like, why don't you, like, they weirdly, they internalize the fact that they're gay, and they internalize this fact, and it's like, bruh, you're a member of Congress. Why don't you just change the law so that you don't have to be this way anymore? But they make the active choice to do this. And the Star Wars franchise literally has this, and Star Wars theory is kind of a prime candidate for this. Let me explain again. 1999 to 2012 is what is generally considered to be the time period of the prequel era. In Star Wars, like, usually what happens is, like, when the franchise, like, reboots itself or, like, redoes itself for a couple of times, they usually focus on a particular era. Like, when Star Wars originally came out, it was about the movies. And, like, all the other supplementary material was based on the movies. Then, like, they just kind of, like, stuck around. Like, there were occasionally things that did stories outside of it, but otherwise, and, like, from 1999 to 2012, it was generally the prequel era. For most, if not all, the things that Star Wars media had, it was prequel related. Star Wars Clone Wars, The Clone Wars, Battlefront, etc. That's just kind of how it is. And I'll be real, because I remember, when I was a kid, when I was younger, during that era, I didn't recall seeing really a lot of Star Wars stories that weren't related to Star Wars The Clone Wars or, like, prequel era related stuff. And yeah, well, again, there were some things that didn't necessarily fit in that era. The Force Unleashed was released during this time period. It wasn't a prequel related story, but a lot, if not all, majority of things that were released were like that. And each of them had varying degrees of favorability. But the three films themselves were not liked a lot. And this was the beginning of the internet's use in fandoms. So the hate that it got was received a lot. And a lot of it was very vitriolic. Especially considering this is the early internet, where people didn't necessarily know what they could and couldn't do. Noted points of critique were Jar Jar Binks and Anakin. A lot of hatred being directed towards their actors, Ahmed Best, Jake Lloyd, and Hayden Christensen. We even got the rise of YouTubers talking about Star Wars, Red Letter Media making a huge review of The Phantom Menace that got popular, and the beginning of, again, my favorite YouTube channel of Star Wars related things, Hello Greedo. And both of these two ended up shaping a lot of the critiques of the prequel trilogy. A lot of the criticisms that they have for the prequel trilogy, I still maintain to this day. I can't say that I'm immune to the influences some of them have, but I think if I go back on what their reviews say, and I would probably come at it with a different perspective. Like, especially the Mr. Plinkett review, because Mr. Plinkett review is a bit of a bit very cringe. Like, much like how Star Wars theory rambles about how women don't like Star Wars, Red Letter Media used their platform to state that black people didn't like Star Wars, which is a very contentious and very obviously wrong take. But the one thing that a lot of people say was, like, the difference is that Red Letter Media said it as a character, and Star Wars theory doesn't say it as a character, but it's like, does the harmful effects that it does really change whether or not it's a character or not? And unfortunately, the criticism, like today, was not the greatest, it was not the best. And a lot of it just kind of boiled down to harassment of a lot of people who were involved in Star Wars. Like, I mean, I don't necessarily want to use this, like, this is a bit of a heated language, and that's intentionally the point, but there was a large period of time where a lot of people who like Star Wars literally made the claim, and I quote, that George Lucas raped their childhood. That was literally what they said of the prequel trilogy. That is literally what they said. Much like how there's this huge vitriol about how Star Wars is killing the franchise, and Star Wars is like ruining it's doing this thing. Like, there's just this huge vitriol about it. And unfortunately, like today, a lot of the hate isn't directed towards any of the people who really could have been directly responsible for a lot of the actual problems with the trilogy. Granted, a lot of people like criticize George Lucas, but like, very rarely did they actually point blank go to criticize George Lucas. A lot of the hatred was directed towards, sadly, Jake Lloyd, Ahmed Best, and Hayden Christensen. Hayden Christensen, I don't know if it was that bad. I mean, he did get a lot of shit for his performance, and I don't know if I haven't read anything that like states that he had like a particularly bad reaction to the fan base. I think there was a decent amount of like he's like I don't know, and he was like I did remember reading a story where it said that he was a little bit afraid to come back to the franchise because of some of the vitriol against him, but like otherwise I think he kind of like did fine because I think he also had other acting roles that like satiated him and made him like actually good, but Jake Lloyd and Ahmed Best, oh boy, Jake Lloyd currently suffers from many mental illnesses, including schizophrenia. Of course, none of this is directly caused by his hatred in the Star Wars fandom, but I think it would be foolish to claim that it has nothing to do with it. And when I say nothing to do with it, I mean, like, it's the same thing. I don't want to use this comparison because this comparison would be detrimental to Jake Lloyd. But, like, Jake Lloyd, he has mental issues that came through biological means. And, of course, when you have a person with a mental disorder or mental illness, and they are treated in such a negative, vitriolic way, especially when they're that young, do you think that that's not going to have an effect on them? Child actors are notorious for, like, a lot of their bad behavior. And a lot of people like to sadly blame the child actor. It's like, why is it their fault? Why is it their fault that they got abused or, like, used in a fucking franchise? And, like, they have this, like, Jake Lloyd should not have been acting. That's another reason why I don't like the fact that fucking Anakin is 9. I don't want children. I will say point blank, right here, right now, I am opposed to the idea of child actors. You can fight me on it all you want. I don't care about all the good performances that child actors have. That is phenomenal. I will give them props for the fact that they have done many good performances. But that does not negate the fact that that children being actors can cause a lot of mental issues for the children down the line. It has before, it will continue to do so. Some of them might get out free, but the fact of the matter is, there are a lot of issues in the Hollywood franchise and Hollywood industry that I think just genuinely needs to be addressed before we can even talk about the idea of having child actors. And yes, some of it is stuff that I probably shouldn't get into because, let's just say Drake Bell suffered a lot of issues during his stay as a child actor. But back to actors related to Star Wars, Ahmed Best. I'll say this. Ahmed Best did not deserve what happened. He did not deserve it. Yes, Jar Jar is kind of like a shitty comic relief character. But the fact that the vitriol against him was so bad that he literally contemplated suicide, he posted a picture of him with his child saying, "This is the place I plan to kill myself." Like, just... And this is the most fucked up part. I genuinely wonder. I wonder what would have happened in a universe where Ahmed Best did it. And you want to know what's fucked up? I don't think anything would have changed. I know this because this has happened before. Many people who have been in this position have taken their lives and nothing changes. Like, bro, we have been through so many things that should have changed everything about how we view creative works, how we view actors who do these things. We have done a lot of things like this, but we still haven't changed that fact because the fact of the matter is we don't care. We as an audience don't care. But the thing is, it at least gives me some slight hope that there is some element of like solidarity with these guys, with these actors. Because Ahmed Best has expressed support for Amandla during the situation. So has other actors like John Boyega. They've shown solidarity with this stuff. They've shown solidarity because they know what this has been through. They've both been through their harassment campaigns before. And they express their solidarity. And that's one thing that's interesting. That's the thing. That's my point. They've been through this. They see how this is. And rather than perpetuating the system on the next generation of people, they want to change the way things are. But you know who doesn't think that way? The people who grew up on the prequels. The people who grew up on the prequels, like me, are adults now. Whether you were, literally, I was born a year after the first prequel came out, and I'm an adult. Literally, anybody who was a child during the prequel era of Star Wars is now an adult. At the very least, people who grew up, who were born, the youngest person who was in the prequel era that could be an adult now is someone who was born in 2006, a year after the Revenge of the Sith was released. The 18, they're all adults now. And this is what happened. They Like, this is the thing. Because again, like, when I was a kid, I loved the prequels. But then I saw these Star Wars channels. They're like, oh, they're hating on it. They hate the prequels. They think the prequels suck. They fucking hate the prequels. And they're like, oh, anybody who likes the prequels are fucking stupid kids. How dare you? You fucking stupid idiot kids. How dare you? You fucking stupid. You're stupid idiot kids. Fuck you. You're idiots. You're stupid, dumb, bonobo-brained kids. And a lot of prequels fans internalize that. Rather than looking at that and going, you know what? Maybe when I become this age, I won't be able to do this. Maybe I will change. I'll be better. Maybe I'll bring more constructive criticisms to the next future of Star Wars. Maybe as they get older, they'll learn the truth. Like, I remember, I didn't know that Ahmed Best was treated. I thought it was just funny, haha, shit on Jar Jar Binks, he's stupid, haha, it's funny. I didn't know it was like, oh yeah, he almost killed himself. It's like, you think I would have laughed at the fucking Jar Jar Binks jokes if I heard that he was going to kill himself at one point? You think I would have laughed at that? And now that I know all this, and I've grown up, I've learned, I'm like, I think it is our best interest to remove the toxicity of bad fandoms and move forward and do things better. Star Wars Theory looks at that. Looks at all the hatred and pointing and laughing at him over the fact that he liked the prequels. And instead of trying to do things to change it, simply goes, now it's my turn. And that's why he taxed the sequel trilogy. Now he can bully the kids. Now he can shit on the Star Wars. Now he can do this. And this is just a common thing with fandoms in general. Another fandom that I'm into, Pokemon, the black and white game, like Pokemon Black and White, at one point used to be considered the bad games. They were the bad ones. The people who were like fans of Pokemon since Gen 1, they hated Black and White. They're like, this game fucking sucks. It's trash. It's garbage. It is terrible. Anybody who likes it is fucking gay and stupid. But then, now, they're regarded as the last good ones. And the people who grew up with them can now turn around and endlessly shit on the new Pokemon games. And can use the same vitriolic evil language that was used against them. I don't do that. I look at I've played the newest Pokemon games. I've played every Pokemon game from Black and White to the most recent games, or at least the main series Pokemon games. And I've given praise, I've given criticisms to them. And much the same with Star Wars. I've watched the movies, I've watched all this stuff before. I've given praise to some things, I've given criticisms to other things. It's literally just the cycle of abuse, where if it's like you beat your kid, then your kid is more likely to become an abuser themselves. Why don't we just fucking stop the cycle? Why don't we just stop it? We have the power to stop the cycle. And I think I should use it, and we should use that power to do that. And that's why I've changed a lot of things about how I view criticism. I used to just love it and be like, yeah, fuck this movie, fuck this show, fuck this is garbage. Now I think about it and go, hold on. What would I do differently? What are the things that I would have tried to do differently? What are the things that I could have done differently? What is the behind the scenes story? What is everything behind the scenes that might have changed how this view went? Was the studio meddling? Does the creator have other good works that they've shown without the support of this other person? So maybe it's like this writer. Like, again, we can just look at that. We can just analyze that. Or we can just break the cycle. And this is the thing. This isn't new. And not just in the sense that this is a thing that is done with the sequel trilogy. This is a thing that has been done with the prequel trilogy. The fucking original trilogy has had stuff like this too. A story that I literally learned while doing research for this episode was the story about Billy D. Williams, the actor who played Lando Calrissian. Apparently, he was a victim of fucking harassment too. He was a victim of harassment for betraying Han Solo. Like being harassed by Star Wars fans. He would be harassed by stewards on planes, guys in the grocery store. He would go to his kid's school, and the parents would literally give him dirty looks and say, how dare you betray Han Solo? Dude, you are an adult with children. It is a fucking movie. Calm down. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with this sequel trilogy garbage. It's why I don't take this seriously. Instead of just saying, I don't like this movie, it is bad, I do not like it, they instead go, this movie is secretly a political agenda done by the elites to secretly turn our kids woke. That is what the problem is. And your problem is then going, notice how the films with these black actors, these are the ones that are doing bad. Interesting. No, that's not the problem. Why can't you just, it literally just has to be, Guys, point blank said, I hate The Rise of Skywalker. I don't think The Rise of Skywalker is this hidden secret political message about this whatever. It's just a shitty movie. I don't like it. And that's all it has to be, and that's all it will be. If you're a Rise of Skywalker fan, you can leave comments in the video description trying to explain why it's a good movie. I probably won't read them, or I might read them and just not reply to them, because it's just like, I'll think that all the things you're saying are wrong, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can like it. I don't care if you like it or not. If you got your willies out of it, then sure, who cares? You're not an inherently bad person or a good person for liking or hating certain. It's the same thing. It's like, it's not like a person who hates. It's not like I'm gonna look at a guy who hates or loves episode 2 and then go like, oh, I'm gonna base my entire opinion on you based on how much you love or hate this movie. It's like, it's a movie. Calm down. Also, I just want to make note of this. Billy D. Williams, Ahmed Best, Moses Ingram, Amandla Stenberg, and John Boyega. Notice how those are the actors that get a lot of the big hatred and vitriol attacking them. Notice how the only major black actor in Star Wars that didn't get harassed in any way, to my knowledge, was Samuel L. Jackson. And that has actually been used to try and defend the whole, see, we didn't attack Mace, so it ain't about race. Ironically, as far as I can tell, Mace and Sam are kind of the only ones that you can criticize legitimately. Okay, let's try to look at them again. Like, what can you criticize about the actors individually? Like, I mean, the only thing I can give criticism towards, like, Samuel L. Jackson in regards to the Mace Windu's portrayal is the fact that he just portrays him, like, in a very, like, soft-spoken, like, cold manner, and that the character kind of stinks. But I mean, I guess like the latter is kind of the point. He's supposed to be like the guy who's like too up in his hubris to understand what's going on around him. But I mean, aside from the fact that the characters are written bad or whatever, I don't really have a problem with the actors in general. The closest one I have is the Inquisitor character, but like again, or I guess Jar Jar Binks as well, but like again, it's like not really like that bad. Like, and the thing is, in the entertainment industry, this is profitable. Star Wars Theory will continue to do this because he makes money. And that's just how it is. Maybe in the future, he'll mellow out like Red Letter Media and Hello Greedo did. That's why I kind of like Hello Greedo more than all the other things. Because it's like, not only did he like avoid this sort of like vitriolic attack against the sequel trilogy, probably because he's like an adult man who has a kid now, and he's just like, yeah, I just can avoid this for all the matter. But the fact of the matter is, it's just like, we don't have time for him to wait. He's doing shitty behavior now. We need to address it now and not like wave it off. But another problem comes to the fact that Star Wars Theory is the largest channel of this subject. So he needs to set an example. Like, I mean, he tries to diminish it. Like, oh, you can't tell me to diminish my opinion. It's like, we're not telling you to diminish your opinion. We're telling you to stop with the handling. We're telling you to stop with the racism. That's what we're telling you to do. Stop palling around with racists and stop palling around with like people who are openly like stop defending the fucking race. Again, like the dude is literally just like he waved off the idea that Amandla Stenberg got harassment for her race. Just waving it off immediately, just like, what? He needs to learn that his actions have consequences. Especially since we live in an era where literally these toxic fandoms are not just like, oh yeah, they just like get me on the internet. Because that's a lot of things that a lot of people like to do. That, oh, it's just like media hatred. Calm down. It's like, remember, Ahmed Best nearly killed himself because of the harassment. Jake Lloyd's mental health was fucking like trash because of it. But things get worse, especially when you're adding this like fucking like political element, like not even just like political elements in general, but like look at this. Animation reviewer Mr. Enter both started and was a victim of multiple harassment campaigns because of toxic fandoms on both sides. The Steven Universe fandom, particularly the toxic fan base part of it, almost made a fan artist commit fucking suicide. Finn Wolfhard, child actor in the hit show Stranger Things, was stalked for 4 blocks by adult fans who wanted a picture with him, literally followed him to his house to take pictures with him. Many toxic male fans of like female actors will literally like Photoshop their faces in porn. It's like a very common porn category for like them to Photoshop actors in it. And one of the most sad examples is Christina Grimmie, who was literally murdered by a toxic fan. I know we need to acknowledge the fact that she has more than just being murdered by the toxic fan, but like, yeah, she was murdered by a toxic fan. And a brief acknowledgement of this, because there are some people who are on the anti-Star Wars theory side that have turned around and then went, like, why can't, like, I mean, like, have made, like, very, I'm not going to say exactly what they said, but, like, have made very equally egregious comments towards Star Wars theory. And no, well, you need to acknowledge this. Yeah, there are some people on this side of the aisle that are going to get a bit more vitriolic against Star Wars fan than most normal people would. But you also got to acknowledge this fact. Star Wars theory likes to pretend that the people who are in his fanbase that are racist towards Amanda Stellberg don't exist. So, can't we just pretend that these people who are issuing death threats to him don't exist? I would say no, because that's fucking ludicrous to do. Do not, I repeat, do not try to issue death threats to Star Wars theory on my behalf. I do not want that. Like, literally, even a simple fucking acknowledgement of, like, hey, there are racists in the fan base. Don't attack Amanda's for her, like, race or anything of the sort. Like, it's literally, this is just so easy. Like, there are video essayists that'll make videos of, like, literal criminals and will make, like things at the beginning saying, like, don't harass any of the people involved in this video. It's like, it's a very simple thing you can do. Don't harass any of the people mentioned in this video. That's what I'm probably going to do for this video as well, because it's just like, yeah, I genuinely do not want anybody to harass anybody in this video for anything of the sort. Nobody mentioned in this video should be harassed by any means, any stretch of the word, because I'm going to set a good example by making this point very abundantly clear. An acknowledgement to where maybe Star Wars theory can change this. Maybe he can start doing this, where he's like, at the beginning of every video, then he's like, this is going to be a contentious topic. Don't harass anybody. A simple that would probably do something. Won't fix the whole problem, but it would fix some things. And I mean, just the fact that stuff like this can be very prominent in the fandom is just sad and depressing. And it makes me think like the whole fandom itself has failed. But not yet. As I was writing this, there's currently a Twitter campaign to actually try to remedy this. Calling out many of these right-wing, like, reactionary, like, Star Wars themed channels, Star Wars Theory, Geeks and Gamers, Neurotic, and Ryan Canal, /Arcade Outpost, citing many of the incidents from them, like doing like very interesting things, and like pointing out like a lot of like things that they have done in the past. Like, I mean, there's very common, there are like videos of them everywhere, like just doing all the things that could get them in trouble. So it's like, it's not like it's really difficult to do. And it simply just asks for one thing, for their channels to be demonetized for their borderline TOS breaking content. Which ultimately won't solve the problem, as there are many other revenues of finance that they will have, and I'm not 100% sure that these guys are doing it for the money. I literally think that a lot of these guys are just doing it because they're reactionaries. But that's really a different systemic issue that we'd have to tackle. But, you know, I mean, it's a good first step, but there needs to be more done on a systemic level to fix the problem. We need to change how the nerd culture is, and we need to change how the patriarchal society is. We need to do a lot of changes to fix things. I mean, you can have all the resources. I would put a hashtag about it in here or somewhere, but like, there's no hashtag related to it apparently. But yeah, I just genuinely think that this, like, the Star Wars fandom needs to change, and hopefully it needs to change for the better, and hopefully it will. Anyways, that's pretty much all I gotta say on that subject, and I could tell I had a lot to say on it. But what can I say? I'm a Star Wars nerd. Of course I had a lot to say about it. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, consider supporting me on Patreon.